Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Luna was released from the infirmary that evening to find all her things that had been stolen from her and hidden had been returned and were neatly stacked on her bed. The elves had been called by Professor Flitwick, and everything that was tainted had been cleaned and, where necessary, repaired. When she was released, Harry escorted her to the Ravenclaw common room and pointed out to everyone she now wore on her upper left sleeve the Potter crest, showing she was now a protectee of House Potter. No one missed the implied threat. After she had happily put away all her returned things and changed into fresh clothing while Harry waited in the common room, and glared at anyone who even thought about saying anything, Harry took her across to the come-and-go room where the others were all waiting, doing either homework or just chatting. Daphne had already convinced the others to allow Luna to be a part of their group, though it took little effort, which also meant she was shown how the room worked. Because she was behind on her assignments due to the number of times her homework had either been damaged or stolen, the group helped her set up a schedule to get back up to speed, and provided her reference materials and advice to speed the process along. One time, she burst into tears, and it took a while for the girls to calm her down. She explained the reason for her tears was that, other than the time the group had allowed her to ride in their carriage on the express with them, no one had shown her a kindness during her time at Hogwarts, until Harry, that morning. "Well, that part of your Hogwarts experience has ended," said Susan firmly. "We'll be here for you, and you don't need to worry about any more bullying. That's now been taken care of. And you just need to talk to Harry or the rest of us if it starts up again," said Neville. "Harry doesn't take his role as protectee any less than completely serious. You'll see." "Thank you," she sniffled. "I haven't had a friend in what feels like forever." Harry frowned and said, "I thought Ginny Weasley was your friend." "She's more of an acquaintance now, really," she replied sadly. "She's been nice for the past few weeks. I didn't tell her what's been happening as I think she's still traumatized about Tom. And I think she thinks I don't want to be her friend anymore." "Well, that's up to you what you want to do about it," said Daphne. "But this room and what it can do is our secret, so we don't want you telling anyone about it, all right?" "All right," she said. "It is a marvelous room, and I can understand why you feel the need to protect it. You make very good use of it." The next morning, the 7+1 took seat at the Gryffindor table. Again, Harry sat with his back to his own. He was sitting with Daphne on one side and Luna on the other when Ron Weasley walked in and saw Luna sitting with the 7. He got angry. "What's Looney doing?" was as far as he got, calling out loudly enough for many others to hear before Harry was up and out of his seat and had the other boy by the throat, squeezing. His magic was roiling around him in waves. Professor McGonagall was up and moving as soon as she heard the invective Looney. The twins were up as soon as Harry moved. However, they were sitting on the other side of the table, and it took them a while to circle around it and come up from the other side. "Mr. Weasley," growled Harry, squeezing enough to completely cut off the other boy's air supply, "either you are mentally defective, or you have a death wish. I care not which." "Mr. Potter," called Professor McGonagall, hurrying up. Harry hesitated a moment before calling back, "This student seems to either believe he is exempt from retribution. I mete out to those who attack either of my protectees that what Professor Flitwick made clear to the entire student body last night means nothing to him, or he truly is mentally deficient. I am trying to determine which is the case." "Harrykins, please," said one of the twins as they arrived from behind their brother. "Let us deal with him," said the other. "Mr. Potter, it was you who pointed out I'm responsible for discipline in this school," pleaded Professor McGonagall. "He will be punished, I assure you." Harry released Weasley and stepped back. "Fine," he growled as the twins stepped forward to catch their brother from falling. "I will not act in my role as protector of Miss Lovegood out of respect for you, the twins, and Miss Ginny Weasley. However, this is a one-time free pass." "Thank you, Mr. Potter," said McGonagall with a sigh of relief. She turned to the twins and simply instructed, "Bring him," and marched out the double doors. The twins frog-marched their brother out right behind her. "He was going to kill me," the boy croaked as he was marched out. As he watched them leave from behind, Harry heard the voice of the headmaster. "Was that really necessary, Mr. Potter?" asked the old man with his "I'm so disappointed in you" voice. Slowly turning around, Harry glared at the headmaster and said, "No, headmaster, it was not. You simply enforcing the school charter, specifically where it states no student shall be permitted to bully another, would not have seen Miss Lovegood bullied for a year, would not have seen Ravenclaw House near decimated of students, and with what will be the lowest number of points in its history since the point system was established, and would not have seen that idiot boy walk in here and put himself in a position where it would have been lawful for me to kill him." "Harry, you need to learn to forgive," said Dumbledore. "Are you a headmaster or a priest?" asked Harry with a growl. "I'm headmaster, of course," replied the old man, becoming flustered. "Then please stop trying to do a priest's job for them," said Harry. "You're the headmaster. Please do that job. Telling your students they have to forgive those that trespass against them isn't in the job description. I'm still the headmaster of this school, Mr. Potter," the old man getting angry, "and you will treat me with respect." "And when have I not, headmaster, while we've been having this little tete-a-tete?" he asked right back. "I have addressed you by your title and I have used courteous language. There is nothing in the law or rules of this school that forbid me from arguing with you so long as I maintain those marks of respect. That you do not like what you hear is not a sufficient reason to take offense. I also remind you it is you who sought this exchange by coming down here and initiating this conversation." "My office now, Mr. Potter," the headmaster barked, turning around and storming away. "As has been made clear to you, headmaster, both verbally and in writing by my magical guardians, you are required to provide me 72 hours advance warning of a request to meet with you," called Harry. "You are also required to submit that request to me in writing. Therefore, headmaster, I must decline and shall await your written request." Dumbledore spun on the spot, glared at him again, and stormed off. No request was later sent. "Impertinent, impudent child," ranted the old man, as he stormed into his office. "I take it you're again referring to young Mr. Potter, Albus?" asked the portrait of Phineas Nicholas Black. Dumbledore sighed and looked at the portrait. "Yes, Phineas, I was. You seem to know me well." "Well, I was your potions master when you were a student here, Albus," replied the portrait. "And I was your headmaster," said the portrait of Dexter Fortescue. "You've also been headmaster for almost 40 years, Albus. Don't you feel it's time to allow another to step in?" Dumbledore scowled and said, "I still have too much to do to step down." "And little of it is the work of a headmaster," said Phineas. "You're far too focused on that thrice-bedamned prophecy to give the role of headmaster the attention it deserves." "You need to determine where your priorities lie, Albus," said Dexter a touch angrily. "Is it this school or the prophecy?" "It has always been the greater good of the wizarding world," growled Dumbledore. "The position of headmaster, as were the positions of supreme mugwump and chief warlock, has been in support of that purpose since the prophecy was made." "And what makes you think you're even on the right track?" asked the portrait of Everard Twycross. "You always were pants at divination. Or have you forgotten?" Dumbledore just grumbled and glared at the portrait. "Ah, yes," said the portrait of Armando Dippet, "and is it truly the greater good, or the same greater good your friend Grindelwald espoused?" "Enough," snarled Dumbledore, waving his wand without looking to temporarily lock the portraits down. His problem was, as he wasn't paying attention to what he was doing, he missed the portrait of Phineas Nicholas Black. Making a decision, Phineas drifted out the side of the frame. In Grimmauld Place, Sirius was carefully going through the books within the house library to place under protections those he considered far too dangerous to leave out in the open on a simple shelf. "Sirius Black," he heard a voice call down from up the stairs. "Where are you, you bloody disappointment?" Frowning, Sirius rose from where he was sitting and listened. He checked the wards and knew no one had come through them other than him and Rimmies, so it had to be something else. "Sirius," the same voice bellowed. Popping his wand out, Sirius crept up the stairs, careful not to step on the creaky ones, and made his way to the tapestry room. "Sirius," the same voice bellowed yet again. The bellow almost made Sirius jump in fright. With his heart beating firmly in his chest, Sirius carefully made his way into the room, scanning everything. "There you are," disappointment he heard, turning to the sound with a curse on his lips. Something was different. "Oh, put that away." He saw the portrait of his great-great-grandfather, Phineas Nigellus, moving within the portrait frame that had been empty since he'd returned to the family home after his release. "Phineas," said Sirius, reholstering his wand. "I'd call this a pleasant surprise, but I'd be lying, and I'd know you would be," snarked the portrait. "What do you want, Phineas?" asked Sirius, a little annoyed. "I want to talk to you about my great-great-great-grandson Harry James," replied the portrait, becoming all businesslike, "the Potter boy." "I know who Harry is, Phineas," snarked Sirius right back. "He's my godson." "Sworn?" asked the portrait, looking back with an intensity Sirius had only ever seen on his grandfather Arcturus's face, and when he looked in the mirror, it meant what he replied was very important to the man. Sirius hesitated for a moment, and, believing an honest answer wouldn't hurt, replied, "Yes." "Good," said the portrait, relaxing a little again. "It appears you aren't as big a disappointment as you were in your youth. It makes what I need to tell you easier." "And what would that be?" asked Sirius. He'd tolerate his ancestors' backhanded compliments if it meant even a small bit of aid in Harry's safety. "Dumbledore," snarled the portrait. "The man's gone too far." Now showing his own expression of intensity, Sirius asked, "What has the old fool done?" "There's a prophecy about the boy," replied the portrait. Warily, Sirius asked, "Will you report what we discuss with Dumbledore?" "No," the portrait frowned back. "I take it, from your expression, you're aware of it." "I am," nodded Sirius. "Good," said the portrait. "It saves me having to find a way around my oath to tell you, then." Sirius waited. "Dumbledore is bent on seeing the prophecy come to fruition under his terms," said the portrait, frowning. "He's attempting to engineer situations that will bring the prophecy to pass in the way he wants, possibly far sooner than intended." "Idiot," snarled Sirius. "What can you tell me about these plans?" "He's focused on controlling young Harry James. He calls him the primary," said the portrait. "There's another boy he calls the secondary." "That would be young Neville Longbottom," said Sirius. "Correct," said the portrait. "Dumbledore's original plan was for Harry James to be cared for by his maternal aunt and uncle, the muggles named Dursley. He made sure all communication from the wizarding world sent his way was blocked, claiming it was for the best if the boy not receive any. He believed young Harry James would constantly receive fan mail, that his enemies would try to use owl mail as a way to find him, or even porky him away from there. He wanted the boy to have a normal, happy childhood. However, it was also about controlling what information the boy received. Then there's the Blood Wards. Are you aware of them?" "Yes," replied Sirius. "However, they'd be gone by now. Harry needed to be at the house for at least a month or more each year to re-strengthen them." "That's well and truly past." Nodding, Phineas said, "Harry James was already protected from Voldemort and his followers by the blood magic his mother employed to save him in the first place. Otherwise, how could he have survived the killing curse? Therefore, he could have been placed anywhere and still been afforded those protections. As long as someone loved and cared for him, the protections would remain in place. Without checking first if it was the right thing to do, Dumbledore disconnected the anchor from Harry James himself and anchored those protections to his muggle aunt's home. Once Dumbledore realized that was a mistake, it was too late. He couldn't move the protections back. His mother designed the runes and spell to only protect a single person, never an entire house. If Dumbledore had left well enough alone, those protections would still be afforded the boy. It was a mistake that may well yet cost Harry James his life. Dumbledore was aware the Dursleys and magic did not mix. However, he believed, since the aunt had sent a letter asking she be allowed to attend Hogwarts, she would not be adverse to having a magical child in her household. He expected Harry James to be well cared for, if not loved. He then expected Harry James to be a happy, well-adjusted boy, but completely clueless of the magical world. Because knowledge is power, he hoped to control Harry James through controlling the information the boy received. In that way, Harry James could not act until he, Dumbledore, provided him the information Harry James needed to act. Dumbledore would be the guiding hand that would point Harry James in the direction he wanted him to go. However, Harry James arrived at Hogwarts having far more information concerning the wizarding world and his heritage than Dumbledore expected. He did not expect Harry James to be so proactive in gathering information, to absorb such information at such a prodigious rate, to have already claimed his headship, or discover he was contractually betrothed to the daughter of one of the lords on the Wizengamot he is unable to control. And Harry James accomplished all this in only 6 weeks. Without being able to control the information Harry James receives, Dumbledore now cannot control him through that method. He has tried to use his charm and grandfatherly persona to gain Harry James's trust, but it too has failed. Harry James sees right through it. So I worry the fool will now try to use other, shall we say, less legal forms of control. You and I both know there are charms and potions he could use that will not show any outward effect. And while Dumbledore received an outstanding in potions and went on to work with Flamel in alchemy, it's his loyal potions master Severus Snape who will brew the potions he needs. But Harry James wears the head of house ring for House Potter, and Dumbledore believes he may have other methods to detect such charms or potions of which he, Dumbledore, is unaware. However, Neville Francis and his other friends do not. They represent a weakness in Harry James's psyche, and Mr. Longbottom is the secondary. "You care for him, Neville," said Sirius. Phineas nodded and said, "He's another descendant. He's my great-great-great-grand-nephew through granddaughter Calidora. She married the Longbottom. It's over there, on the tapestry." Dumbledore's determined to have Harry James under his control so he can guide the boy towards his destiny. The way he sees the boy's destiny, if Harry James fails, then he will have young Neville Francis in place to step up and complete the prophecy. In other words, that bastard is attempting to mold 2 of my descendants into weapons which he controls. "But Voldemort didn't mark Neville," said Sirius. "How does he see him as being the possible one written in prophecy?" Phineas shook his head. "You aren't seeing it. Try to at least think like a Slytherin, Sirius Orion, before I put you back on my disappointment list. Just because Neville Francis hasn't been marked by Voldemort yet, it does not mean he won't be in future." Sirius looked back in shock. They hadn't thought of that, and the truth of it was obvious. Cygnus, Isabel, and Augusta pulled out of the greengrass pensive, and none of them looked happy. Sirius, from where he leaned on the back of one of the chairs in the office, said, "Well," Cygnus replied, "it doesn't surprise me Dumbledore seems to have completely forgotten Phineas Nigellus' oath to House Black takes precedence over his oath of confidentiality to the headmaster. As long as Phineas sticks to talking about threats to Harry and Neville, he's in the clear. Otherwise, I dare say he would have locked the portrait down or moved it to another part of the headmaster's quarters where it wouldn't be able to hear plans." Turning to Gran, Sirius asked, "And how are you, Augusta, after seeing that? If that whiskered old wanker comes anywhere near Neville, or Harry for that matter, with a potion or charm," she fumed. "We don't know he's actually going to do it," said Sirius. "That could just be Phineas imprinting his own Slytherin tactics on Dumbledore. At least, Dumbledore hasn't mentioned anything like that in his office while Phineas has been able to hear, nor has he said anything within Remus's excellent hearing range. I'll tell Harry, Daphne, and Hermione to use their rings to check for either potion or charm for Neville and the others. Anyway," said Cygnus, "it's already good that they constantly shift tables, and even they don't know at which table they'll sup until one of them walks into the Great Hall and chooses. Ah, I forgot. All tables except one. Ravenclaw is now on their personal ban list. Harry discovered one of the female second years has been systematically and maliciously bullied since just after she started at Hogwarts. He only found out when he discovered the girl huddling and crying behind a tapestry on the 7th floor early one morning a few days ago. He got her to tell him a lot of what had been happening to her. After she sobbed her little heart out on his lap, she fell asleep. He then cast warming and sleep charms on her and levitated her down to the infirmary and called for Madame Pomfrey to come to see her. He got angry, didn't he?" said Sirius. "Yes, but he didn't lose his temper this time. This time he called for his pensive and had Professors Flitwick and McGonagall view it. It was both professors who went nuts at the students after they came out. "Professor Flitwick?" asked Isabel. "Kindly little Professor Flitwick?" "Yep," grinned Cygnus. He immediately jumped up onto the end of the table and started yelling. His magic, when it flares, crackles with small bolts of lightning. By evening, 7 students were suspended. A further 15 were placed in detention. All Ravenclaw prefects were stripped of their positions, including the head girl. The entire house lost access to the house library, and they lost over 1,600 house points. Ravenclaw is about to have the year when the house will have recorded its lowest ever number of points. "This we've got to see," said Sirius. Cygnus smirked and held up a file containing a memory strand. "I come prepared. I received this morning." Then he switched the 2 memories out, with Sirius returning his to his mind before they all, including Sirius, dived in. After classes, Harry and the others had gathered in their room in the come-and-go room and were working on assignments. The weekend was approaching, and they wanted it as clear as possible so they could work on their spellcasting. Harry also wanted to teach Luna the trick with flaring magic. Harry felt his mirror warm up and buzz in his pocket. Taking it out, he whispered, "Padfoot," onto the surface. It cleared, and he could see his godfather smiling back. "Here, kiddo," said Sirius. "Hiya, Sirius," he said back. "How's tricks?" "Pretty good, pup," replied Sirius. "Good. Let's test then, shall we?" smirked Harry. "Sit, stay, roll over. Good dog." Sirius barked with laughter and said, "That's almost exactly what your mother said to me once." Harry chuckled back. "So to what do I owe this most pleasant conversation?" "Actually, it's a most unpleasant matter," said Sirius, turning. "Well, Sirius." "Oh?" asked Harry warily. "Who is currently with you in hearing range, pup?" asked Sirius. "Just us 8, replied Harry. "I've placed Luna Lovegood under House Potter protection, and she's here with us in the come-and-go room." "That's a good idea," said Sirius. "Anyway, we, your lovable guardians, now have a spy within Dumbledore's service. They've passed on to us some worrying thoughts." "All right," said Harry. "What troubles them?" "Well, Dumbledore had this whole plan where you would arrive at Hogwarts nice and pliable. He'd then play the role as the kindly grandfather, and you would come to adore him in that role. That way he would be able to control you," explained Sirius. "When you arrived at Hogwarts with a great deal more information that he expected you to have, had already taken up your head of house ring, were betrothed, and seemed to dislike him, he then tried to get you to start liking him again, and again come to see him as the kindly grandfather type. That's what a lot of those early meetings you had with him in first 2 years were supposed to accomplish. He's now realized none of that is going to work. So our spy is worried he's going to try and slip you potions or charms that will strip your will to resist and once again be the pliable little puppet he really wants you to be." "My ring should stop that," said Harry with a growl. "Yes," said Sirius, "and this is all conjecture at the moment. We may be completely wrong. However, he may try to get to you through your friends, by getting to them first and using them to get to you. We also believe it's why he offered the Dada position to Remus, to have yet another avenue to get through to you." "Damn it," snarled Harry. "What we want you to start doing, Prongslit, is for you, Daphne, and Hermione to start using your rings to check the food for your entire group of friends." "Yeah, we can do that," sighed Harry. "But it's going to be obvious we're doing it." Sirius shook his head and said, "No, we've figured out how to get past that. If you all start passing messages to each other across and down the table and use your ring hand to do it, you'll be able to use that gesture to scan the food if you pass the notes slowly enough."
"That'll work," said Hermione.
"You can also reach across the table to pick up a condiment or place something on someone's plate and suggest they try a bit. I'm sure I can come up with more ideas." Surprised, Sirius said, "Yeah, they'll work too. You should use a combination of different methods, but scan the entire area of food before you start eating or drinking. We're also working on getting your friends' rings that will be charmed invisible, but have the same potion and charm detection features as the head of house and betrothal rings have. So, we're needing 5 now?" "Yeah," replied Harry. "5 would be nice." Nodding, Sirius said, "You leave that to us. I'll see that jeweler you introduced me to last Christmas." "Okay, thanks," said Harry. Good, said Sirius. Now, Cygnus said he also has some news for you from Uncle Algy. I guess it's a private matter, but he said you and Neville would know. He's going to come to Hogwarts to speak with both of you about it next Sunday. Harry glanced up at Neville to see the surprise on his mate's face. Looking back down at the mirror, he said, Yeah, we do. Thanks for passing on the message. All right, pup, said Sirius, not pushing. Take care of yourself, and look after your friends. I will to both. Thanks, Sirius, he said. And remember, Remus is right there and you can go directly to him if needs be, reminded the old dog before he disconnected. Sliding the mirror back into his pocket, Harry said, If anyone needs anything from home, best let me know as soon as you can. I'll get Cygnus to pick it up before he visits next weekend. Not getting a response except for a meaningful glance from Neville, he went back to his assignment he was working on. On the Saturday of the weekend, Harry, as promised, loaned his Nimbus to Ginny so she could go try out for the now vacant slot on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. It seemed that a boy named Cormac McLagan in 4th year was the seeker the previous year, and once he found out Wood was going to hold open tryouts for the slot this year, abused him and the other players and stormed off in a huff. Apparently the twins danced a jig in happiness. Harry and Neville went down to watch the tryouts, both because he was interested in how well Ginny flew, and because it gave him time to talk to Neville away from the girls. I've been thinking, Nev, said Harry. Should I alert the teaching staff? Asked Neville with only the barest of smirks. Prat, said Harry. Here I was, about to bring you into the world of prankdom, and you made a joke about... He stopped and said, Hang on, that's even more of a reason. Neville chuckled while he watched the practice. Let me try this again, said Harry. I've been thinking we should practice more speaking that twin speak the Weasley twins do, where they finish each other's sentences, but only in our group while we're in the come-and-go room. Why? Asked Neville, confusedly. Because I want to play a two-part prank, said Harry. I want to prank the Weasley twins by polyjuicing ourselves to look like them and accusing them of taking polyjuice to look like us. Neville snorted. Let me get this right. You want us to look like them, and then you want to accuse them of being the imposters. Right? I take it we do this in public, such as in, say, the Great Hall. Right, replied Harry, or in their class or something. Next, as they already know we'll be the imposters. Naturally, said Neville. We take them aside and have them join us in pranking the Great Hall by having there be 4 Weasley twins, all speaking twin speak. Neville smirked and said, That's going to drive Professor McGonagall nuts. There's nothing inherently illegal about it, and it's only banned at the school for examination purposes. I like it. We should do it for lunch only, as the length of the evening meal would mean we'd be there for more than an hour, said Harry. We're already going to need 2 doses each. And the owl post will give us away as the owls can see right through it, said Neville. Do we tell the girls? We'll have to, replied Harry. They'd be worried about us missing if we don't turn up. And where do you plan on getting the polyjuice potion from? Asked Neville. I was hoping the girls could brew it for us in the come-and-go room, replied Harry. Why not use the office of the Etiquette Club? Asked Neville. Nev, exclaimed Harry happily. That's bloody brilliant. No one will be able to find it and fiddle with it then. With a smile, Neville said, All right, I'm in. Yes, said Harry with a bit of a fist pump. We'll tell the girls this afternoon. You two are bonkers, said Hermione. Hey, it's a harmless prank, said Harry. Yeah, it's not as if we're going down into the Chamber of Secrets, said Neville. Or fight a ruddy great basilisk, or anything, said Harry. That earned him a glare from all the girls except Luna. It's just harmless fun, said Neville. It'll crack a few laughs, said Harry. It means the twins become the target of a prank for a change, said Neville. Without anyone actually being hurt, said Harry. Oh, Merlin, groaned Daphne. They're doing it again. After first giving her head a little shake, trying to clear the confusion she was beginning to feel from the near twin speak of the boys, Trace said, And you want us to brew the potion for you? You, Daphne and Hermione, are the best brewers we've got, said Harry, getting up and walking over to one of the bookcases. It's a pretty advanced potion to brew. He looked through the shelving until he found a book called Most Patented Potions. We discussed this book last year, if you remember, he said, flipping through the pages. Oh, Here it is. Bringing the book back to where they were all sitting, he placed the book with the pages open to the potion. Ingredients are lacewing flies, stewed for 21 days, leeches, powdered bicorn horn, knotgrass, fluxweed picked at full moon, shredded boomslang skin, and a bit of who one wants to turn into, usually hair. Thinking, Daphne said, the two difficult-to-obtain ingredients are going to be the fluxweed picked at a full moon, and the shredded boomslang skin, and powdered bicorn horn are expensive. We can get the fluxweed here, said Luna. It grows down near the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Really? Asked Hannah. It's supposed to be quite rare. I didn't know it was available outside of a herbologist's greenhouse these days. Oh, the Forbidden Forest was where the founders and others since used to grow potion ingredients. So if you look around the edge of the forest, you sometimes find some, replied Luna. All right, said Tracy. We'll go take a look. If we find it, there's a full moon coming up on the 30th of September. Hermione, who had pulled the book over to read, said, That's a couple of weeks away, but we have to wait for the lacewings to stew for 21 days anyway. So, we're doing this? Asked Harry to the group. The girls looked at one another before Daphne said, If you're so determined to do this, then yes. The boys looked at each other and said, Yes, almost in unison. If anything, it's quite an advanced potion, and we can use it to demonstrate a skill level above our year, said Daphne. But you're going to have to get the ingredients we need before we need them. Harry rapidly nodded his head with a big grin on his face. As it's going to take about a month, said Hermione. Where are we going to brew this where it won't be tampered with? The Etiquette Club office, said Harry. I had thought in here, but it means the door will always be visible, I think, and we don't want people just walking in and finding this place. So you two have 4 weeks to practice talking like Fred and George Weasley and learning all you can about them, said Susan. If you're going to temporarily steal their identities, you need to know how to be them. Otherwise, people will quickly figure out you two are the imposters. The more I think about this, the more fun I think we're going to have with it, said Neville. Oh, he said, turning back to the girls. We're going to need at least 4 doses of it, possibly 6. So plan on making a decent-sized batch of it. Why 6? Asked Hannah. We need the first pair for when we play the prank on Fred and George, replied Harry, holding off his hand and ticking them off on his fingers. We're going to need the second pair when, with Fred and George's help, we play the prank on the school in the Great Hall. And the third is, if we're stuck in the Great Hall and it looks like going over the hour, we can sip the spare to extend the time. Polyjuice potion is often quite handy to have, said Tracy. We may as well brew up a decent-sized batch of it. Good, said Harry. Then I just need a shopping list for Sirius to pick up what we need from Diagon Alley. Self-heating cauldrons, stirrers, stewing solution, etc. I still think you two are bonkers, said Hermione, looking at Harry and Neville. Rather than looking abashed, both boys just grinned back. The 4 ladies' rings and 1 male ring arrived for the other 5 members of the 8 a couple days later. The rings were loaded with all the auto-detection spells they could load onto them. Charms, curses, and potions that were tried to slip past them through their food or mail would be in most cases caught. The rings were also charmed to remain invisible at all times, unless they detected something. At that time they would appear and flash or vibrate as necessary. Harry, Daphne, and Hermione instructed them on the wearing of the rings and how they worked. And, from then on, the 8 sat together and often passed notes, offered food, made silly gestures over the food, and anything else they could think of to have their rings pass over food and drink before it was touched with any part of their physical bodies. Luckily, none of it was coming up with anything that appeared harmful or otherwise mind-altering. Remus also had Harry and the others hold back at the end of their classes and used the opportunity to run scans on all of them. None of the scans were showing any sort of harmful potion or charm. The days were starting to march on, and the 8, or Harry and the 7, as Harry and the others started to learn they were now being called by other students, were starting to get used to the added course and assignment load. The Polyjuice potion was almost complete, and the 2 boys had been practicing as often as possible. Twin speak. They were getting quite good at it. They quickly figured out it was often best if Neville started a sentence, as Harry was quite intuitive as to where the sentence should end. But Neville did have his moments and could do it too. With Luna guiding the way, the girls found the flaxweed for the potion and picked it during the full moon. Plus, they also found other botanical potion ingredients and carefully marked each for later use if they needed it. Sirius, as Harry knew he would, loved the idea of the prank and immediately went into the alley and purchased the required missing ingredients and the equipment. And the girls set everything up in the club office. It was Hannah who foresaw another problem, and she and Susan worked on solving it. While Neville wore Gryffindor colours, Harry did not. And the twins were also both a bit taller than the two boys. So Hannah and Susan worked on transfiguring the robes of both boys into the right-sized Gryffindor robes that would match Fred and George. Next, they also figured out how to password the spell-cancelling charm Fenite Incantatum to stop someone casting it and undoing the change, with their names as the passwords. That was a spell that later became a popular addition in the Aura and even Unspeakable Spellcraft Armory. Ginny Weasley also made the Gryffindor Quidditch team and, as promised, he approached her and offered her the use of the Firebolt for the Gryffindor against Slytherin game. The girl almost cried in happiness. Harry ensured she had ample opportunity to practice on it so she wouldn't be mounting it for the first time at the match. The Eight's contentment came crashing down when Harry was contacted late one afternoon by Sirius via mirror. "Bad news, pup," he said. "Oh?" asked Harry, as the others all crowded around. With a sigh, Sirius said, "Pettigrew managed to escape from Azkaban." Shocked, Harry asked, "How? I thought that place was supposed to be escape-proof." "Apparently not," said Sirius. "Apparently the guards relied too heavily on the belief it was escape-proof. And the Dementors, about once a month the prisoners are, one at a time, removed from their cells while the guards enter and scrub it clean. They forgot Pettigrew as a rat animagus, and instead of putting anti-animagus cuffs on him while he was out from under the anti-animagus wards on the cell, they put normal magic-inhibiting cuffs on him. Instead, they left him in another cell just watched over by a Dementor. As soon as the guards moved away, he transformed into the rat. From experience, I know the Dementors leave you alone while you're in animagus form, and he scurried out through the bars and away. The guards only left him alone for 5 minutes, but that was 5 minutes too long. By the time they returned, he was long gone. A search of the island turned up nothing. "Damn it," growled Harry. "When does the news break?" "The Prophet already has it," replied Sirius. "However, they've agreed to hold off on reporting it until tomorrow morning's edition, rather than releasing a special edition this afternoon." "All right," sighed Harry. "What's being done?" "Well, here's the second bit of bad news," replied Sirius. "The minister is absolutely convinced Pettigrew is going to go after you. So he's going to station Dementors at Hogwarts." "What?" exclaimed Harry. "Is the man a naffing idiot? These children can't protect themselves from Dementors." "No, they can't," replied Sirius. "The minister is convinced the children are perfectly safe because the Dementors are under ministry control. However, we all know that control is rather tenuous. However, Dumbledore is also already fully aware of the minister's intent to place Dementors at the school, and has used his position as headmaster to state they won't be allowed on the grounds. Instead, they'll be set to patrolling the area immediately outside the castle wards." "That's still too naffing close," growled Harry. "We know, but it's the best we can do for now," said Sirius. "And why the hell would the rat come after me?" asked Harry. "He was here in the castle for 2 years already. If the rat wanted to make a try for me, he'd have already done it." "That was our argument," replied Sirius. "However, Fudge is not a man who will listen to reason when he has his mind made up about something. He wants to be seen as doing something rather than admit he's at a loss as to what to do." "Damn it, damn it, damn it," growled Harry. "When do they get here?" "They're already on their way," the old dog replied. "They're being herded across the land from the island even as we speak. They'll probably be there in a couple of days." "Herded?" asked Harry. "Just how many of the neffing things are being sent here?" "About 100, replied Sirius. "Oh, this is just getting better and better," grouched Harry. "Well, your Aunt Amelia has offered Dumbledore a team of auras to protect the students, and to teach the older years how to cast the Patronus using your teaching methods. which, by the way, are now part of the mandatory curriculum for the training of all Aurors coming out of the academy from now on, said Sirius. However, Dumbledore refused. His excuse is that the Dementors won't come inside the grounds of the castle because they'll have been told not to. Personally, I think it's because he doesn't want to create the precedent of having Aurors stationed at Hogwarts, and he's using them as a way to place further controls on the students. The students won't be able to leave the castle without being escorted by a professor. Stupid old fool, snarled Harry. Sirius nodded and said, "So your Aunt Amelia is asking you, through me, to offer to teach the older years how to cast the charm. The way to get past Dumbledore's restriction is to approach Professor Flitwick and offer him to teach it in his older years classes." "Yeah," sighed Harry, "that I can do." "Then I've done my job and will leave you with it," said Sirius. "Good luck." "Yeah, see you, Padfoot," sighed Harry, and the mirror went grey. Turning to the others, he said, "I need to go and speak to Professor Flitwick, and I'd best do that now." Harry and Neville were waiting in the entrance hall for the arrival of Uncle Algy, also known as the Unspeakable, Algernon Croker, when what looked like a seventh-year Ravenclaw student entered and said, "Boys, it's me." The two boys looked at each other before Neville's eyes widened. He turned back to the student and, in a shocked voice, asked, "UA?" "In the flesh," the student said with a grin. "I'm glad to see that fall from the third floor. Did you know lasting damage when I let go of your ankle?" Neville grinned and turned back to Harry. "It's him," he said. The student, now identified as Uncle Algy, gestured to the hall's antechamber and said, "Let's go in here, shall we?" Harry and Neville looked around to make sure they weren't being watched before walking into the antechamber they were in immediately prior to the sorting. Croker followed them in, shut the door, and immediately started casting wards about the place. When he finished, he turned back to the two boys and allowed his glamour to drop. He was wearing his unspeakable uniform and reached up to allow the hood to drop back onto his shoulders. "Lord Greengrass came to see me and hand-delivered the memories of you two in the chamber. Speaking to Riddle and fighting the basilisk," he said. "I must say, you two impressed the hell out of me." Neville blushed while Harry grinned. Neville still wasn't used to receiving praise, and praise by the head Unspeakable was high praise, indeed. "Because of the effort of both of you," continued Croker, "we're that much closer to putting an end to Riddle. If what he said down there is true, we now know he aimed to create 7 of those monstrosities. However, we believe he would have been able to only split his soul 6 times. You destroyed one in the diary, and using basilisk venom in the fang to do it was brilliant, by the way." "That was Fawkes's idea, not mine," interrupted Harry. "Irrespective of that, we now know that's a way to destroy them, and you helped us discover it," Croker gently replied. "We also know of 2, or possibly 1 now, fragments of soul that were in your scar when you arrived here, and the one inside Quirrell. Both of those fled to parts unknown for now. That leaves 4 parts, with each part possibly, even probably, housed within Horcruxes. To find those, we're going back over Riddle's past to see what else he may have used, and where he may have put it." "Well," said Harry, "the diary was in the possession of Lucius Malfoy. It's possible other Horcruxes are in the possession of other Death Eaters. If I was given one of those to keep safe, I wouldn't want it where someone could come across it, accidentally, or steal it. I'd put it in my vaults." "If the goblins discovered you did that, they'd kill you," said Croker. "It's a breach of their laws to—" The older man suddenly stopped and appeared to be thinking hard. "Uncle Algy?" asked Neville, concerned. "You know," he suddenly said, "Riddle wouldn't necessarily tell his Diz they were Horcruxes. He'd just tell them it was important they be kept safe. Based on that information alone, they might well have put such an item in their vaults." Looking at Harry, he said, "Well done, Harry. If we all manage to survive that long, come and see me after you finish your education. I'll probably have a job for you in my department. It's a rare wizard or witch who can think critically like that." "Thank you, sir," replied Harry. "Any other ideas you want to let me know about?" asked Croker. "Well," said Harry, "if I was looking to hide more of those Horcruxes, I wouldn't just rely on my underlings. Once one was discovered in the possession of such a person, then it stands to reason they'd also search the possessions of the other known underlings For example, it's led us to thinking about a Horcrux in a possible vault. I'd be looking at hiding one or more of them myself, probably more rather than one, but I'd hide them in places significant to me, such as my childhood home. I mean, he made one out of his school-time diary or personal journal or whatever it was supposed to be. Clearly, it was an item of significance to him. He might hide them in places that are such too. I'd look in Gaunt Manor if there is such a place, and maybe where he worked after school, and in the place he was raised before coming here. Hell, there might even be one here, since he spent 7 years of his life here. What do you think? Yeah, said Croaker, a little amazed. You're definitely coming to work with me when you finish your schooling. It's a good thing you're taking arithmancy and ancient runes, or I'd be wanting to talk you into switching over to them. If you were magical raised, I'd insist on you taking Muggle studies too if you weren't already taking it anyway. Those are all sound leads and go with what we've been thinking. I want you to keep on thinking about leads too. Anything else? Not on that, no, replied Harry. However, Dumbledore is quite canny. He saw the 2 malevolent spirits for what they were, and he also knows of the diary. He might well be searching for them as well. I want to leave the old meddler out of it for now, mused Croaker. He has a bad habit of sticking his nose into matters and screwing things up 6 ways from Sunday. Neville? Anything from you? Asked the older man, turning to him. If he was going to hide one here, mused Neville, it may very well be in the chamber. After all, it takes a parcel tongue to get in, but the castle's a big place. It could even be in plain sight, and we wouldn't know. It's a pity we don't have something we could use to pinpoint it for us. That is, if one is here, of course. Looking up at Harry, suddenly he said, one could even be his award for special services to the school in the trophy room. How do we know if it is? Asked Harry. That you leave to me, said Croaker. Do you still have the diary? No, said Harry. I used it to trick Malfoy into freeing his abused house elf Dobby. Croaker snorted and said, I saw the memory of that you provided to Lord Greengrass. Did Dobby give it back to you? No, said Harry, a little disappointed. I didn't think to ask him for it back. Call him for me, said Croaker. Harry shrugged and said, All right, Dobby. The excitable little house elf appeared. Did the great, wise, and wonderful Harry Potter, sir, call Dobby? Croaker snorted in amusement. I did, and thank you for coming, Dobby, replied Harry. The little elf teared up and said, The great Harry Potter, sir, thanked Dobby. Dobby is such an honoured elf. Ignoring the remarks, Harry asked, Do you remember what happened to the diary I hid the sock within after your ex-master gave it to you? Oh yes, Harry Potter, sir. Dobby put it away for safekeeping, the elf replied. Keep the sock, of course. But could I have the diary back, please? It's very important, asked Harry. Certainly, sir, said Dobby. He popped away for a few seconds before returning with another pop. Holding it in his hand, he offered the diary to Harry. Here you are, sir. Accepting it, Harry said, Thank you very much, my friend. You may return to what you were doing. Tearing up again, the little elf said, The great Harry Potter, sir, considers Dobby his friend, before he popped away. Harry silently offered the diary to Croaker. May I ask why you need it? After all, the soul piece within it was destroyed. Yes, but the magical signature and residue were not, said Croaker. That's what we'll use to determine the others. He dropped the diary into a pocket in his robes. Now the chamber. Yes? Asked Neville. I believe you said it takes parcel tongue to get in, the older man asked. Yes, said Harry. In parcel tongue, it's open to get into the secret entrance, and open again to open the doors to the chamber itself, to open the mouth on the statue, if that's important. It's speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts 4. Croaker drew a glowing crystal from another pocket and said, Speak those 3 into this crystal. It'll record it in perfect clarity. Said Harry, a little abashed. I can only speak it when looking at a snake or picture of a snake. Croaker smiled and made a slight gesture. Suddenly, a picture of a snake appeared in his hand. He held it next to the crystal. Harry blinked in surprise before leaning forward and speaking clearly. Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts 4, before standing back up straight. Croaker dropped the crystal back into his pocket. "And that's how we do it in the dorm, boys. Now, I believe the entrance is located in the second-floor girls' bathroom. The one Myrtle usually haunts?" "Yes," said Harry. "There's a circle of sinks just inside the door. The sink that directly faces you has an engraving of a snake on the faucet. Say 'open' in Parseltongue to that, and it opens up to reveal the entrance. Be aware, though, it's a dirty, messy slide down. Fawkes brought us back up the slippery pipe afterwards." "Thank you for the warning," said Croaker. "I think that's it for now. Do you boys have anything else for me?" "No," said Neville. Just a query, actually," said Harry. "Yes? Why don't the Ministry place tracking charms on their prisoners?" he asked. "In case of escape, I mean, along the lines of the tracers we have to track us for underage magic." Croaker smiled and asked, "And how would we go about that?" "Well, I know it's illegal to place tracking charms on citizens, but prisoners do not have the rights of citizens. And it's only illegal to place the charm on someone, not leave it there if it's already there. If I was doing it, I'd find some way to engrave it in rune form onto the bone of their skull, as that bone grows the least in the human body, so the charm can't be finite incantatuned. At least, that way, there won't ever be another at-large escapee like Pettigrew. I'd also not tell them I was doing it, either. You unspeakables like to keep secrets, so it's something you can do and not tell anyone you did it." Croaker grinned back and said, "Well, you've thought it through this far. How do you propose to secretly engrave it on their skull?" "All right, you've now got all these lords and other purebloods recently arrested," replied Harry. "Tell the prisoners someone with political power wants to see them all receive a proper health check. Do it during the health check. A little numbing charm or potion for the area, and it can be done. That way, if there are any more escapes, you can track them down. It should be a doddle then. And if they are lawfully released at a later date, you still have a way to track them in case they reoffend." Croaker chuckled, shook his head a little slowly, and said, "You are definitely coming to work for me." Turning to Neville, he said, "Not a word about this to anyone. Neville, I don't want to have to memory charm you." A little fearful, Neville said, "Not a word, Uncle Algy. I promise." Croaker nodded and with a grin asked, "Anything else?" "A font of ideas." Harry grinned and replied, "Not right now, no, but I'll keep you in mind if I do." Croaker laughed and said, "See that you do." "So there you have it, Professors," said Harry, talking to both Professors Flitwick and McGonagall in Professor Flitwick's office. "The head of the DMLE has tasked me with asking you if you wouldn't mind allowing me to teach your older years how to cast the Patronus charm." "It's a very good idea," said Professor Flitwick before turning to Professor McGonagall. "Minerva, do it, and we won't be telling the headmaster you're doing it either," she said to Harry before turning to the charms master. "Let Mr. Potter know when the classes are on, and I'll let the professors know for the classes he misses that he's otherwise busy on a special project for the pair of us." "Are you sure you can do this, Mr. Potter?" asked Professor Flitwick. "It's quite an advanced charm and most adults can't do it." Harry nodded and said, "Over summer and in secret, at the request of Madam Bones, I taught a class of 24 auras who were, until then, unable to cast the charm after many months of attempts. By the end of a couple of hours, I had all but 2 of them casting fully corporeal patronesses." Both professors looked back at him in shock. The first to recover, Professor McGonagall asked, "How?" "As I explained to that class, the instruction of what sort of memory to use is wrong," explained Harry. "You're told you need to use a happy memory. While that is inherently true, it needs to be more than that. Think of your own happy memories. You'll see the memory also has a strong element of love involved with it. When I tried to teach this charm to her, Miss Granger, she tried to use the happy memory of her being handed her first report card with top marks across all subjects. However, that memory failed because, while she thought it may have been the happiest moment of her life, there was no love in it. So, we found a new one for her. It was a memory of her father cuddling her in his arms and telling her how proud he was of her. It was her father's love and her returned love that made the memory powerful enough. The feeling of love is the memory required, not happiness. Both professors thought about that for a few moments before Professor Flitwick said, "You know, that makes complete and perfect sense. Love has a magic all its own, and my own memory includes the element of love." "As does mine," said Professor McGonagall, "and it is love rather than happiness that is anathema to Dementors and Lethifolds." Turning back to Harry, Professor Flitwick said, "All right, Mr. Potter, you're about to become a temporary professor of charms at Hogwarts. Your first class is 9:20 a.m. on Monday morning." "Thank you, Professor," replied Harry before turning to Professor McGonagall. "And that means I'll be missing your class first, Professor McGonagall." Nodding, she smirked and said, "In that case, I shall let myself know you won't be attending." That evening, Dumbledore stood to make his announcement. "Our school, starting from some time over the next few days, will be playing host to some of the Dementors of Azkaban who will be here on Ministry of Magic business." Except for Harry and the Seven, the headmaster, and Professors Flitwick and McGonagall, no one was aware at that time as to the escape of Pettigrew from Azkaban. "They will be stationed at every entrance to the grounds and patrolling just outside the wards," he continued. "And while they are with us, I must make it plain that nobody is to leave school without permission. Dementors are not to be fooled by tricks or disguises, or even invisibility cloaks," he added blandly, and the eight all glanced at one another. "It is not in the nature of a Dementor to understand pleading or excuses. I therefore warn each and every one of you to give them no reason to harm you. I look to the prefects and our head boy and girl to make sure no student runs afoul of the creatures. That is all." Surprising the Ravenclaws, who had all completed their punishment for their treatment of Luna, the eight were sitting at the Ravenclaw table. Harry's argument for doing it was that he needed the Claws to now understand that he was once more recognizing them as fellow students. Harry arrived early to his first seventh-year charms class on the Monday morning and sat perched on a stack of books in the front corner of the classroom. As the seventh year's new A class filed in, they saw him and started to talk among themselves, wondering why he was there. Professor Flitwick chivied them into their seats and to quiet before mounting his stack of books at his lectern. "As you are all aware by now," he began, "a very dangerous convict has escaped Azkaban and is believed by the minister to be on his way to Hogwarts. We, the staff, very much doubt he is. However, the minister has decided to send Dementors to guard Hogwarts. They are currently surrounding the school, outside the boundaries and at each entrance to the grounds. With the support of the DMLE and the permission of the deputy headmistress, it has been decided the older students, at least, should be taught a special charm. Can anyone guess what it is?" The professor then led the class through the basics of the charm and how it was one of the very few charms known to drive away Dementors. "Now you will all have, no doubt, noticed Mr. Potter has joined us. The reason he is here is because, besides being the youngest person to have ever successfully cast the Patronus charm," Harry looked at him in shock. He didn't know that. "He has also successfully taught this charm to people who had, until then, not been able to cast it. For this class, please accord him the same respect you pay me, as he will be the adjunct professor who will teach you this charm. I suggest you pay close attention, as it is quite possible this charm will save your life." Turning to Harry, he gestured to the class and said, "Mr. Potter." Harry rose and said, "Some of you have only seen me cast my Patronus once. Some of you may have also seen my Patronus as I've sent it galloping through the corridors of the school. But to ensure you all know I can do it at will," he popped his wand into his hand, drew in a bit of magic, thought his happy and loving thought, and expecto patronum. Prongs flew out his wand, trotted a few paces forward, stopped and looked around, and trotted back. Harry held it there while he turned back to the class. Some of the students gasped and chatted a little excitedly to their seatmates. "As you can see, my Patronus takes the form of a stag, my father's animagus form," he said. "Each person's Patronus form is unique to them. It is always of an animal, and in one case I know of, a magical animal. The components of this charm, and you'd best consider writing this down as it may be in your new AD exam, are intent, as always, the incantation of expecto patronum, no discernible wand movement other than point, a happy memory that includes the emotion of love, and as always, a push with your magic. Now, unlike most other charms, we are going to focus almost this entire lesson on the emotional component. Once you have that, the rest is relatively easy. Oliver Wood raised his hand. "Yes, Mr. Wood," asked Harry. "If this charm is so relatively easy, as you put it, why can't everyone do it?" he asked. "A very logical question, Mr. Wood," replied Harry with a smile. "5 points, Mr. Wood," said Professor Flitwick. "The reason is because most people do not understand what is meant by a happy memory," answered Harry. "How many Odos did you receive, Mr. Wood?" 7, he replied a little sheepishly. "All right," Harry smiled. "Were you happy with that?" "It was all right," he replied. Nodding, Harry asked, "And how would you have felt if you received, say, 11? "Ecstatic," the boy firmly said. "Good," said Harry. However, that feeling would not have been enough to power a Patronus charm to a fully corporeal Patronus, and that's because, while you would have been ecstatic with such a result, there would have been no love involved. So, here are some examples of happy and loving thoughts you may want to consider to power your own Patronus, said Harry. And by all means, write them down. Being held in the loving arms of your father or mother, the love you feel being a big brother or sister to your little brother or sister, and having them think you're their hero, the love you feel for your boyfriend or girlfriend, the love you have for your favorite grandparent, the feel and love of family you had at Christmas while you were sharing around gifts, or something along those lines. Harry gave them a while to write it down. Continuing, he said, "Now, while you're sitting there, I want you to focus on those subjects, or a similar one, and remember it as best as you can. Think about all of it, remember all of it, and focus on the feeling of love you felt at that time. Let it fill you up." He gave them a chance to think about that. Sitting off to one side, he saw a Hufflepuff student almost flushing with her eyes closed. She almost seemed to glow. Perfect, thought Harry. When she opened her eyes, he said to her, "Miss Higgs, would you mind coming down here out front, please?" A little shocked at being addressed directly, the girl then blushed and came around to stand out front. Harry then stood her facing parallel to the desks and back out towards the door. "Excellent," said Harry. "Now, Miss Higgs, it was very easy for me to see you had found your memory. You were practically radiating love. So I want you to draw your wand and stand loosely with it in your hand." She drew it out of her sleeve and held it down to the side. "Excellent. Now the incantation is Expecto Patronum," he said. "Bring that feeling of love back to the forefront of your mind. Focus on it. Let it fill you again. Revel in it." He watched her for a few moments, and as she started to flush a little again, he softly said, "Cast now." She effortlessly raised her wand and softly called, "Expecto Patronum." A tiger shot out of her wand and stood there for a moment before it faded away. She'd lost focus. "Wow," she loudly whispered. Professor Flitwick laughed out loud and clapped his hands in glee. "Very, very well done, Miss Higgs. 20 points to Hufflepuff." "Your Patronus is very powerful, Miss Higgs," said Harry, grinning his head off. "The apex predator of Asia, the Asian tiger." "Wow," she said a little louder. "Please take your seat," said Harry, gesturing to her stool, "and please practice it in your own time, though if we have time I'll ask you to cast it again before the class ends." As she, almost in a trance, went back to her place, Harry said, "So, as you can see, you can do this. It just takes the right memory, and no one needs to know what it is except you." "Next volunteer, please?" he asked, looking around expectantly. Harry worked through almost all the students before the time ran out. "With the professor's permission, I'll return next week to assist the others of you. However, this does not stop you from practicing the charm on your own time." He looked to the professor, who was grinning back and nodding his head. "Excellent. I shall see you all again next week." Over the next couple of weeks, Harry was able to work through all the 6th and 7th years. About 70% of them were able to cast at least a misty shield. About 55% were able to cast at least an outright corporeal Patronus. A few had near-perfect Patronuses that looked almost solid. He was disappointed the numbers appeared so low. However, both professors were incredibly happy with his results and told him so. Their most optimistic targets were only half what he actually accomplished. During Harry's stint as an adjunct professor, Neville suggested it was the best time to implement their prank on the twins and the school. So, on the Friday as they left Charms together, they grabbed their already prepared polyjuice potions and met with Susan and Hannah not far from the History of Magic class. They'd found out the fifth-year Gryffindors had that class this period and would be coming out soon. Neville and Harry chugged their potions back, and, as they were changing, the two Puffs transfigured their robes and other clothing to match the fifth-year Gryffindors they were mimicking. The girls checked out their handiwork and, happy with the results, left them to it, laughing all the way down to the Great Hall. To not give away who was polyjuiced, the group, -2, sat at the Hufflepuff table. Both boys joined in with the group of fifth-year Greffs and just started chatting with whomever. Lee Jordan came hurrying up from behind and said, "Sorry I'm late, mates. Professor McGonagall wanted to make sure I was prepared for next week's game and remind me, again, I'm not to abuse the snakes." Neville said, "It's sweet, Lee, my man." Harry said, "But you're still going to, right?" Lee grinned and said, "Of course." The real twins heard Lee and, stopping to wait for him, turned around. Harry and Neville saw the twins had turned from talking to Angela Johnson and Alicia Spinnet. "Ah," exclaimed Harry, straight away before the real twins saw them. "Doppelgangers," exclaimed Neville. The twins looked back in shock. So did everyone else, for that matter. "Ladies, those aren't us," said Harry. "They're frauds," cried Neville. "Mimics," cried Harry. "Imposters," cried Neville. "Fakes," cried Harry. "Besides, we're much better looking," said Neville. "Better than those two," declared Harry. "They're probably snakes," accused Neville. "Come to learn," accused Harry. "Can do Quidditch strategies," they accused together. Everyone just looked between the two sets of twins, utterly confused while Harry and Neville glared at the twins. The twins, however, looked at each other and grinned. "Well, brother of mine," said Fred. "It appears the jig is up," said George. "Right then," said Neville. "It's off to Professor McGonagall," said Harry. "With you too," said both. Grabbing one each, the two boys quickly hustled them away. As soon as they were around a corner, one of the real twins said, "This way," and all four took off down a corridor. They were shown into yet another secret passage, where the real twins stopped and turned to Harry and Neville. "Harrikins," said one. "And Neville," said the other. "We presume," they said together. Harry and Neville grinned at each other. Neville asked, "You like?" "Brilliant," said one.
Absolutely, said the other.
"Ready to prank the entire school together?" asked Harry. "Lunch?" grinned Fred. "Or George?" "Lunch," said the other three, together. That had them all laughing. The secret passage led down to the ground floor, and they entered back into the castle proper, not far from the entrance hall. "I wish we'd known of that one in first year," said Neville. "Yeah, it would make getting back to both Gryffindor and Ravenclaw that much easier," said Harry. Before walking into the entrance hall, Harry and Neville topped up their polyjuicing and mixed themselves up with the real twins. One of them even adjusted Harry's tie and said, "We're never that neat and tidy." By then, lunch was in full swing, and the four walked in 2 by 2, chatting to whoever was really next to them. The twins liked to sit with their backs to the wall, so the four immediately moved across to the wall and headed in single file up behind the 7th years on their way to where the 5th years normally sat. It took the hall a little while to notice, but just as they reached their normal places to sit, the whole hall was staring at them in shock. "What?" said someone. "They think I'm getting better looking each day." "I'm the one that's getting better looking. Not you." "Me?" "Oh, shush. You know I'm the better looking one." "Mr. Weasley," shrilled Professor McGonagall from the head table. "Yes, Professor," all four called back, trying to look innocent. Professor McGonagall put both elbows on the table and just dropped her head into her hands. "Whatever it was, Professor—" "I didn't do it." And, in a four-way chorus, "Honest—" All four, surprised, looked at each other and grinned while many in the hall burst into laughter. Professor Flitwick was trying to console Professor McGonagall, but was laughing too much to do the best job of it. "Remus," Professor Lupin was laughing his head off and banging his hand on the table. "I can't believe we got a week's detention," muttered Neville. "Hey, don't blame me," said Harry. "It was the twins that bollocksed it up." "Oi!" they heard in stereo. Turning to look back at them, Harry said, "You just had to see if you could annoy Snape, didn't you? It was a perfect, unpunishable prank until then." "What do you mean? Unpunishable?" "Just that," said Neville. "There's nothing illegal or against the rules of Hogwarts about using polyjuice unless you attempt to use the potion to cheat on exams." "And we weren't doing that," said Harry. "Therefore, we couldn't be punished for it." "We didn't know that," said one. "The four were currently in the potions lab scrubbing cauldron after cauldron. Who knew you could actually go through so many?" "No, you just decided to use the fact we were impersonating you to prank Snape in plain sight," grouched Neville. "He then nabbed us for the same crime as accomplices, and an accomplice gets the same punishment as the instigator." They scrubbed for a little while longer before one of the twins asked, "So this polyjuice potion your girls brewed?" The 31st of October was the first Hogsmeade visit for the year. As they were now third years except for Luna, it was the first Hogsmeade visit for the group, and the group generally wanted to make a day of it. It was Daphne that looked sympathetically at Harry and told the others that she and Harry wouldn't be joining them. "I want Harry to join me for a quiet time of discussion as we go for a walk. We'll also visit some of the shops, but it should just be Harry and me for this day." "Oh?" asked Hermione before it dawned on her. She blushed and said, "Oh, sorry. I forgot. I'm not a very good friend." Harry reached out and took her hand in his own. "You're a wonderful friend, Hermione," he said kindly. "I don't expect everyone to remember every special date just because I can. All of you already have to remember over a dozen birthdays, plus the holidays, plus other important events. It's okay." While all of them shared a couple carriages to take them into Hogsmeade, they split off once they disembarked in the village. Harry and Daphne strolled arm in arm through the village setting within their mind, where everything could be found before they actually began their shopping. "Where to first, my love?" asked Harry. "Well, I promised Luna I'd pick her up some more parchment, ink and quills to replace that which was either damaged or stolen from her, and I need more as well," she replied. "Sounds good. That would be Scrivenshaft's quill shop at the other end of High Street," replied Harry. "Let's go." After picking up the required stationery needs for Luna, Daphne also picked up extra parchment, and, when Harry said he needs some too, she picked up more for him. Added were more quills and a little more ink. Neither realized before the year started just how much stationery they'd be going through this year. On exiting, Harry looked to Daphne and asked, "Next?" "Next door," she replied. That's Gladrag's Wizardwares," said Harry, a little warily. "I know," said Daphne. "I haven't had a chance to visit the store in ages, so I want to go in to see what they're stocking." Harry sighed and said, "Anything for you, my love. You know that. But please, don't make me into a dress-up doll. Not with all the students running about today." Daphne smiled back and said, "Okay. No making you dress up in fine clothes just so I can see you in nice clothes. I promise." Harry breathed a sigh of relief as they mounted the front porch of the store and entered. Though Daphne didn't make him dress up in nice clothes, as soon as she started working through the women's underwear section, Harry made a little squeak noise and took off for the men's section. There he found some nice shirt and trouser combinations and decided to try them on himself. Inside the change room, he quickly changed before stepping out, intent on calling Daphne over to take a look. There was no need, though, as she was standing there waiting for him with a smirk on her face. He was surprised to see her before he frowned and said, "Please, don't tell me you went through the unmentionables just to get me to do this." She grinned back and said, "No, but thank you for the future idea." With a pained expression, he just sighed. She lightly laughed and said, "Turn around and let me have a good look." Obediently, he turned slowly around with his arms held slightly away from his sides. "Your taste is improving," she said, "but it's not there yet. What else have you got to try on?" Harry muttered something about finicky women and returned to the change booth. He stepped out a minute later wearing another combination. Daphne looked up and down his form for a moment before she slowly twirled her finger point down. He'd already learned that particular signal. He slowly pivoted on the spot, the full 360 before stopping with an eyebrow cocked. She nodded a little and asked, "What else?" With a sigh he replied, "I've only got one more combination to try," and returned to the booth. A minute later he was stepping back out. The first thing he saw was more men's clothes draped over her arm. "Gaff," he whined. "You promised." "Shush, you," she said, looking him over before making the finger twirl motion again. "I only promised not to make you dress up so I could see you dressed up. You're buying some of these." After he spun the 360, he saw her standing there with her hip cocked and lightly rubbing her chin. Harry called it Daphne's fashion deliberation pose. He only saw her doing it when she was looking at clothing, shoes, other accoutrements, linen, place settings or similar, or him in new clothes. She suddenly stepped forward and handed him a pair of trousers. "Try these with the second shirt," she said before offering him a shirt. "And then this with the first pair of trousers. Set what you're currently wearing aside. I like it." Harry sighed and returned to the booth, stepping out a minute later in one of her combinations. A slow twirl and she nodded. "Set that aside too, now the other one." In and out again. Twirl. Frowning, she shook her head and said, "No, grab the two outfits I had you set aside. You're buying them." Knowing complaining would do him no good, Harry just shot her a pained expression before returning to the booth. Stepping back out in the civilian garb he wore from the castle, he handed Daphne what wasn't selected and went to the counter with the 2 shirts and 2 pairs of trousers that were. Walking past, she said, "Leave those there for now. I want your opinion on some things I'm thinking of buying." Glancing at the sales clerk with another pained expression, which had the clerk grinning back, he dutifully followed Daphne over to the women's side of the store. When Daphne turned to make sure he was following, she said, "Don't pull that face at me. You went and tried on clothes on your own volition. Now you're going to help me with mine." The sales clerk began to fold the clothing Harry had laid on the counter before her, ready for processing when she heard, "Gah, Daphne. It's called underwear, Harry. It's all frilly and stuff." "Girls wear frilly stuff, Harry." "Now, what do you think?" "I'm not wearing it. How would I know?" "Well, think about me wearing it." "Gah, you rock. You. What's wrong with you?" "Now, would you prefer me in this or this?" "Gah." "Hey," finger-snapping sounds snap out of it. "Daphne. We're betrothed, Harry. You're allowed to think of me that way. Now, come on. Which should I get?" Both then." A few moments later, and Daphne came back out, leading a clearly stunned Harry by the hand. She tossed 2 pairs of rather delicate bra and knickers sets on the counter and said, "Add these too, please." Not trusting herself to say anything, the sales clerk prepped the underwear for packing and processed the lot. When she gave the price, Daphne looked at a still stunned Harry before she rolled her eyes and lifted his right hand. "By ring, please," she said. The sales clerk took the imprint off the ring to bill the vaults directly and handed the bag to Daphne. Daphne spun Harry around and, hooking her hand in his elbow, hustled him out of the shop. As soon as the door closed, the sales clerk burst out laughing. After a long day at Hogsmeade, the 7 returned to the castle. Harry was acting a bit maudlin, but Daphne was able to snap him out of it when she said, "I'll not be going to the feast tonight, either. You and I are going to have a lovely evening in the come-and-go room. You are to wear the first outfit I had you purchase. Today, throw a light cloak on over it and pick me up at the bottom of the secret passage in the dungeons, just after everyone else is seated for the feast." Harry happily nodded. As instructed, he was waiting for Daphne at the appointed time. She approached wearing a lovely blouse and skirt combination with a light jacket and cloak on over the top. Harry wrapped her in his arms and said, "I like this outfit on you. It's quite businessy yet still casual enough for a night out." "That's the look I was going for," she replied with a smile. Stepping apart, she glanced around before reaching up and twisting the wall sconce. As the passage entrance opened, she said, "Come on," and led him inside. As they approached the room, Harry could see there was already a door in place. He looked to Daphne with a quizzical look, but she only smirked in response. Reaching the door, he opened it and stepped aside for her before following her in and closing the door. Before he even had a chance to look around, she cast the door sealing charm on the door, followed by a wizarding "Notice me not." Harry was surprised. They'd never gone to that length before. Turning around, he saw what she had done. He was gobsmacked. Like he had done for her the first 2 years on Valentine's Day, she'd set up a single table for a restaurant meal. However, instead of it being on a balcony looking towards the Eiffel Tower for Valentine's Day in first year, and on a patio under a gazebo looking across a Pacific Island beach in second year, Daphne had selected a rooftop penthouse apartment looking across the New York skyline. They'd entered as if through the main doors of the apartment, and then passed through a floor-to-ceiling set of glass sliding doors onto the patio. Harry could even just faintly hear the sounds of traffic many floors below. Waiting for them was a greengrass house elf. "I know we're in the come-and-go room," said Harry, "but what is this place?" "This is the New York Greengrass property. A penthouse on one of the many skyscraper apartment buildings here, said Daphne. "This is the place we come if we want to catch a stage play on Broadway or go shopping in 4th Avenue, the magical fashion shopping district, or visit the many district, the magical area of New York district." As she was talking, Harry guided Daphne to a seat at the table. "Shopping in New York is amazing, and Mother tries to come here at least once a year," said Daphne, getting comfortable in her chair. "They have the best fashions in the colonies here. And I know she brought Astoria here in June for a week, a couple weeks before the end of the school year." The little house elf waited until they were comfortable before he placed a bottle of alcohol-free red wine on the table next to Harry's hand. He didn't even look at it before pulling the cork and filling Daphne's and his own glass, as he was paying most of his attention to Daphne, telling him about New York. "And what made you think of choosing this as a locale for this evening?" he asked. "I wanted to show you one of the properties the Greengrasses own and hope you will consider it as part of the itinerary for our honeymoon," she calmly said. "I intend to show you around the apartment after dinner." "What a clever idea," mused Harry. "We can do this for all the properties." Daphne smiled. "My thoughts. Exactly." After a short dinner, where they discussed a wide range of topics Daphne had engineered to take Harry's mind off what day it was, Daphne took him on a tour of the apartment. They enjoyed their meal on the bottom floor with its wide outside deck and rooftop garden. Then she led him through the lower floors, showing him the large modern kitchen, the parlor, the games room, and 2 offices. Next, she led him upstairs where he saw 2 guest rooms, the room Astoria usually occupied, the one she usually occupied, and the master suite with its own small sitting room. She led him over to the bed and had him sit on the foot of it. "Sit back a bit, my love," she said. Harry slid back until his knees were hard up against the footboard. She then pushed him until he was laid back, before she kicked her slip-on shoes off and hopped up onto the bed on her knees either side of his thighs. Her full-circle skirt flared out. Daff?" asked Harry, unsure of what is going on. Ignoring his question, she smiled as she knee-walked up either side of his body until she could sit back on his hips. Smiling down at him, she pulled the bottom of her blouse out of her skirt before she began to undo the buttons on her blouse. Harry's eyes opened wide, staring at her in shock. Daff? What are you doing?" "Relax, Harry," she purred, as she continued to undo buttons. "You've been an absolute gentleman, but we are betrothed, and I want to give you a very happy memory to go with the bad ones for this day." Daff, we're only 13, he stammered. "It's nice of you to offer what you're offering." "We're not going to go all the way, silly," she said, reaching the last button. "I just thought you might like to be introduced to the girls." Harry looked like he was hyperventilating. He was panting so much, but Daphne was very pleased to feel Harry's excitement make itself known under her bum. Taking her blouse off and tossing it to the side on the bed, she said, "Do you recognize this bra, Harry? You helped me pick it out." Harry nodded his head rapidly, eyes still wide open. Daphne thought that if she wasn't sitting on him and pinning him down, he'd probably take off. Slowly, she reached for the bra clasp in the middle of her back. She knew it also made her breasts, which had grown quite a bit over the past 12 months, stick right out on her chest. Harry's eyes were locked on her form. He had sweat forming on his upper lip and just below his hairline, and he was breathing like a prize fighter. His hands twitched where they lay loose at his sides outside her legs. "I figured," she softly said, "that if you had a really happy memory on this day, it might help to keep the bad ones away." Clasp released, Daphne brought her arms back around the front and crossed them one at a time to slide the straps off her shoulders. Harry's eyes were darting all over the place. "I don't mind if you stare at my breasts, Harry," she purred. With both straps now down her arms, she allowed her bra to fall into her lap. "After all, you can't be introduced to them if you don't get to look at them," she smiled. From where he was lying, Harry could feel his heart hammering away in his chest. His man-wand was painfully erect and pressed between his groin and her lady cauldron. He was sweating far too much, and he was panting as if he'd just completed an hour of wand work against the target dummies. But he noticed almost none of it. His entire focus was fixed on the sight before him. He had no idea what size she would be. To him it did not matter. He ached to reach out and touch them, to fondle them, to squeeze them. He wanted to tweak her nipples, play with her pale areolae, and caress the milky white flesh. "Do you like them, Harry?" she purred, raising her own hands to cup them, to use her index fingers and thumbs to gently tweak her own nipples. Harry, unable to form coherent sentences, to speak even a sound from his tightly constricted throat except little squeak sounds, nodded his head vigorously. Smiling, she lowered her hands and sought out his. Grasping them, she began to lift them off the bed, turning her own hands until she had his palm out in her own, with his hands resting on her thighs. Lifting them, she said, "If you're going to get to know them, Harry, you need to be able to feel them," and placed the palms of his hands firmly onto her breasts. Harry thought he was going to faint. Hesitantly at first, he began to move his hands about. He became bolder in his movements, his touch. For Daphne, she felt the tingles all the way down to her pit, and when Harry finally became bold enough to tweak her nipples, she felt the flaming surge of desire course through her. It made her tummy do flip-flops. It made her flesh goosebump. It made her insides turn to water. For Daphne, it was the highest form of pleasure she'd ever experienced. Her own hands felt nowhere near as good. She could enjoy what he was doing for hours, but they didn't have time, and she was not sure she could stop if they went any further. With a moan of both desire and frustration, she sat back up straight. Harry's hands followed her. Enjoying the feeling of his hands on her breasts, Daphne had her eyes closed. She moaned again. Opening her eyes again, she looked down at the boy-man that would become her husband, her lover, her partner. "Did you enjoy that, Harry?" she asked. "Because I did." Harry nodded his head and finally found his voice. "Yes," he croaked. "You're beautiful, my love." At his words, Daphne felt another surge down in her loins. Her tummy again flip-flopped. Reluctantly, she climbed off him and kneeled alongside. Harry sighed in disappointment, but was happy his man wand, and the twins were no longer being crushed. He lay back with an absolute look of bliss on his face as he looked lovingly into the eyes of his betrothed. Daphne reached for her bra and put it on. Looking back into the very happy face of her love as she did, she watched when the look of disappointment flitted across his face for the barest of moments as the bra covered her girls again. With the clasp reconnected, she donned her blouse and knee-shuffled off the foot of the bed. Standing again, she buttoned herself back up before tucking the tails back into her skirt. The whole time, Harry lay there watching her with a smile on his face. Popping her wand out, she cast a cleaning charm over the front of Harry's pants before walking into the ensuite. Out of sight of her man, she lifted her skirt to do the same to her very damp panties. When she walked back out and slipped her shoes back on, Harry was sitting on the foot of the bed and scrubbing his fingers through his hair. "We need to go," she said. "Yeah," he replied. "Just trying to get my heart rate to slow down." After a few moments, he stood back up and reached out a hand to hold her own. Together they left the apartment and the room. Just as they stepped outside, Harry turned her into his arms and hugged her tightly to him. "Thank you, beloved," he said, fully of happy emotion. "My absolute pleasure," she returned. "And thank you for not pushing me beyond what I was willing to give." "Never," he firmly replied. The day before the match between Gryffindor and Slytherin, Ginny ran up to Harry crying. "Hey," he said, "what's wrong?" "Stupid Malfoy and his stupid arm," cried Ginny. "He's complained it isn't healed enough for him to play Seeker for his team. So their team captain, Marcus Flint, asked for a switch with another team and got it. We're now to play Hufflepuff tomorrow." "Yes. And?" asked Harry. "You said I could borrow the firebolt for our game against the Slytherins," she cried. "Now we're not going to be playing them until next April." Harry sighed and said, "Well, it's not your fault Malfoy's both an idiot and a wuss. If it means that much to you, you can still use it tomorrow. Either way, you've still got the Nimbus to fall back on." "Really?" she asked, the hope in her eye almost heartbreaking. "I can still use it?" Harry firmly nodded and said, "Yes." With a squeeze sound, she jumped forward and grapple-hugged him. "Thank you, Harry," and happily ran off again. What is it with young girls and they're jumping at you to hug you, he thought, and one moment they're bawling their eyes out and the next they're squealing in excitement. Girls are weird. The next day dawned miserably. It was a sullen day, with low clouds, threatening rain, and strong wind. The others didn't want to go and watch the match, but Harry wanted to watch his firebolt in action in a game, something he couldn't do if he was riding it himself. Daphne decided to come with him to watch. However, her reasoning was that the cold would give her an excuse to snuggle up to him. Harry took his nimbus down to the front steps of the castle and flew them both directly into the tribunes. Once there, Daphne drew a shrunken blanket out of her pocket and unshrunk it before throwing it over both their laps. They'd also brought with them hot cocoas in sealed, insulated mugs with warming charms on them. Of course, both were also wearing their heavy winter cloaks. The ones, of course, with permanent water-repelling charms. Just after the game commenced, a light rain began to fall. Harry cast over them a water-repelling shield, and they continued to watch. He, of course, was mostly focused on young Ginny sitting upon his broom. So far, the girl hadn't done any spectacular moves to show the broom off, for which Harry was grateful, and Lee Jordan, from where he was announcing the game, hadn't mentioned she was riding a firebolt. All he'd done was allude to how Harry had loaned her his Nimbus 2000, because Harry Potter is, after all, a true sportsman and gentleman, and damn him for rejoining the Ravenclaw Quidditch team. "Mr. Jordan," came Professor McGonagall's voice. "Sorry, Professor." The game was going well, with the scores seeming to stay relatively equal, until Gryffindor managed to gain the upper hand and surge ahead. Gryffindor had the better beaters in Fred and George, while the Puffs seemed to have their beaters better coordinated with their chasers. Suddenly, Ginny dove fast. Diggory, again team captain and seeker for the Puffs this year, dove after her. While looking for the snitch himself, Harry kept an eye on Ginny. He couldn't see what she seemed to see, and the broom seemed to be sluggish. Just as it looked like Diggory was about to pass her, Ginny Runsky feinted almost perfectly, with a tighter turning circle than Diggory. With his heftier weight and a broom not as quick on turns, he almost pulled up in time. After he managed to get the handle of the broom up, his twigs hit the grass, causing him to bounce. The buck caused him to be thrown off his broom to go sliding along the wet and slippery grass for about 30 feet. When he stood up, clearly unhurt, his yellow and black robes were dark brown right down his front. Harry couldn't help himself. He laughed. Lee Jordan announced, "Well, it looks like Badger Seeker Diggory decided to go looking for his burrow and couldn't find it. Bad luck there." As Gryffindor's little fire rocket, Seeker Ginny Weasley, pulls off a well-executed Runsky feint. Diggory remounted his broom, still covered in mud, and now thoroughly soaked in muddy water. He climbed back up to Overwatch to be up near Ginny, but Ginny flew even higher. The clouds suddenly opened up and the wind became worse. Soon the rain was freezing cold and it felt like ice on the skin. "We've lost sight of Ginny. Those clouds are coming over really low," called Lee. Harry frowned and tried to find her in among the clouds. Diggory suddenly dived, but Harry was watching the clouds. He saw a movement of black that didn't look right, then more. Suddenly he realized what that black was. "Dementors," he cried, jumping to his feet. Snapping his wand out, he immediately cast Prongs. he shouted, as his very bright, almost solid Patronus shot forward and heavenward. Dementors, he shouted again, just as he saw a clearly unbroomed Ginny fall from the clouds. She wasn't moving and looked unconscious. His Patronus charged up into the sky. Thinking fast, he grabbed his nimbus, mounted it, and took off straight off the front row of tribune seats. About a dozen other patronesses also took off into the sky after the foul beasts, as he urged the broom forward faster and faster. He saw the twins work in tandem and also charge towards the area directly underneath Ginny as she fell. Like a paired precision flying team, the twins turned directly under her, heading straight down, preparing to catch her as she fell past them. Harry, higher than they were, dived over top and accelerated. The twins both managed to snag her by her robes, slowing her down. But she'd have still hit the ground too fast for safety if Harry hadn't come down between them and behind her. He pulled the handle of his broom up between her legs, using the braking charms of the broom to slow all four of them down. It was just in time, too. With only as much force as jumping off a table, all four hit the ground and sprawled across the grass. Harry immediately took off back up into the sky to both find the firebolt and make sure the Dementors were banished. Up high, he saw Patronuses chase the last of the foul beasts off and saw the broom as the wind was pushing it towards the forbidden forest. Hurrying off after it, he managed to snag it before it ended up entangled in the branches of the whomping willow and returned with it to the pitch. On the way back, he switched from his nimbus to the firebolt to keep up the illusion. Ginny was riding the nimbus. Coming in to land, he saw that Ginny was sitting up on the grass and was being almost forced to eat chocolate by Remus, Professor Lupin. Professor McGonagall was off to one side with Dumbledore berating him about the beasts. "How is she?" asked Harry, once he landed in the middle of the pitch. "She's suffering from overexposure to the Dementors, but she's going to be fine," said Remus. "Thanks for the assist, by the way," said one of the twins. "That makes the second time you've assisted in saving our sister's life," said the other. "You're making a habit of it," said the first. Harry shrugged and said, "I caught just a couple of glimpses of black cloaks and knew what it had to be." "The bastards used the cloud cover to come in close," said Alicia, who had walked closer. "Thank Merlin you acted when you did." "It was the precision flying of the twins that caught her," said Harry. "I was only able to slow their descent to a point where the landing wouldn't have seen people in hospital, or worse." During Ginny's overexposure and subsequent fall, Diggory had managed to see and snag the snitch before the twins and Harry even got Ginny back on terra firma. So, the Puffs won. However, it was only by 90 points as the Griffs were in front by 60 points at the time of the catch. Oliver Wood was pleading with Madam Hooch to call the game a bust due to the Dementors, but she said Mr. Diggory caught the snitch before the game could be called. As such, his catch was valid and ended the game at that point. The Hufflepuff win will stand. But Madam Hooch, our seeker was already out by then, and it was a life-and-death situation, the boy pleaded. "It stands, Mr. Wood," said the woman firmly. Taking the twins aside, Harry quietly said, "I don't think anyone has realized Ginny was riding the firebolt today. She hid its capabilities quite well. So, it looks like the plan for her to ambush the Slytherins with it will now be in the last game of the school year. She can borrow it again to train as that game approaches." Both twins grinned and said, "Thanks, Harrykins." "We'll let her know," said one. Even though the Dementors entered the grounds of Hogwarts when they were supposed to remain outside of the boundaries, the minister still would not pull them away and send them back to Azkaban. He argued that they must have had some idea Pettigrew had entered the grounds and were only doing their job by going in after him. Harry, for one, had had enough. He decided to write his own article and contacted Monty Wordsworth to polish it before publishing it in the Prophet under Monty's byline, "Dementors Attack Young Hogwarts Student," by Monty Wordsworth. Yesterday, during a nail-biting, edge-of-your-seat Quidditch game between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, Gryffindor's young rising star seeker, Miss Ginevra Ginny Weasley, 12, was attacked in the skies over the pitch by what reports say was well over 24 of the Ministry's Dementors. The young preteen was quite high and was gently moving through the sky on a borrowed broom from Harry Potter, The Boy Who Lived, when the Dementors, using the low cloud cover to hide their presence, attacked Miss Weasley. The attack rendered Miss Weasley unconscious, causing her to fall from her broom hundreds of feet in the air. If not for the alarm raised by a spectator in the stands around the pitch, who caught glimpses of the Dementors within the clouds and caused all eyes to turn to the heavens, the falling body of Miss Weasley may have been discovered too late. The fall would surely have killed the young pure-blood girl, only daughter of Arthur and Molly Weasley. In a dramatic and incredible feat of superb formation flying, Gryffindor's twin beaters and older twin brothers to Miss Weasley, Fred and George Weasley, 15, were able to maneuver themselves under the plummeting body of their young seeker and sister and catch her. A third broom rider, a member of the audience who had brought his broom with him into the stands, assisted in safely returning the young girl safely to the ground. Questions must be asked of the minister, who admitted in his own words only a few short weeks ago he was personally responsible for sending the Dementors to Hogwarts, why the foul beasts were able to get into a position well inside the grounds to attack the young Miss Weasley. How can they be there to protect the students from an unconfirmed threat when they have now become a threat themselves? Will it take the Dementors killing a pure-blood scion, of which there are many at Hogwarts today, for the minister to realize the so-called protection he has personally sent to Hogwarts are a bigger threat than the original possible threat they were sent to protect against? If the unthinkable does happen, will the minister be charged with murder, his weapon of choice being a Dementor? "Hey, Potter," said Malfoy from where he was wearing a very poorly applied bandage and sling on his arm. "How does it feel not to have your heroics published for once?" "Well, considering I wrote the article with Mr. Wordsworth," he replied, "and had to make him promise to keep my name out of it, other than that I loaned Miss Weasley the broom. Pretty bloody good, actually." The blonde boy looked back in surprise before he just scowled in response. "I'm glad to see the twins receive the recognition they deserved for their incredible flying in catching their sister," he continued. The Dementors were pulled from the school by lunch of the day the article was printed. The staff and students of Hogwarts and the residents of Hogsmeade breathed a collective sigh of relief. Near the English town of Folkestone, a short, balding, buck-toothed, pudgy man wearing an old twill-weave brown suit with a stolen heavy coat on over the top was looking down from his vantage point at the English end of the soon-to-be-opened Channel Tunnel, or Chunnel, as the local muggles had been calling it. Pettigrew was looking for a way across. He had recently been in Folkestone town centre looking for a way to board a muggle vessel to take him across to the continent, where his dark mark was urging him onwards towards the direction of his master. It had already taken him many weeks just to reach that point. In Folkestone he saw a huge display concerning a tunnel the muggles were building under the English Channel. Apparently the two tunnel ends had been connected since December 1990, and work switched from tunneling to building the twin rail lines and services to support the tunnel. That meant he might have found a way to slip out of Britain across to the continent, and hoped it slipped under the magical detection net that was over the two major islands of magical Britain. The cutaway diorama the muggles used in their display of the works showed that the tunnel dropped as low as 250 feet below sea level. He just hoped it was deep enough at the ward line to allow him passage under it, and therefore pass unnoticed. While the tunnel was not open yet, it was due to open in about 6 months, and he definitely wanted to be well clear before those muggle trains went roaring through it at what the diorama indicated were incredible speeds. He was also banking on the tunnel being so new that Britain's DMLE and France's DPM, Département de la Police Magique, were either unaware of it or thought it insignificant in their respective coastwatch programs, where they watched for illegal international portkeys, illegal international apparitions, those attempting the crossing on brooms or magic carpets, and scanned seagoing vessels. As his magical signature was now on file with the ministry and they would be monitoring for it, he knew that if he attempted any of those, he would be caught by the net for sure. Carefully, he made his way down to the construction site. The tunnel represented his only chance to cross without being caught, and he was prepared to take his time to research his course of action and plan to get through. 3 weeks after the Gryffindor Hufflepuff match, and it was Ravenclaw's shot at the Puffs. Poor Hufflepuff had to play 2 of their 3 games with only 3 weeks separating them due to Malfoy's stupidity. However, Diggory seemed quite enthused by it after their win against the Griffys. The weather was again miserable, but this time it was more drizzly rain than horrid wind and low scudding clouds. It was the sort of rain that managed to get underneath your wet weather gear and soak you through in a matter of moments. Simon Martin gave his speech to the team and everyone was hyped up, waiting to get out there and execute their strategy. Harry said, "If you're going to execute the plan, do it early and do it fast. I don't want to be out in this weather any longer than I have to. As soon as I see even a glint of gold, that snitch is in my hand. If the score at the end is 50-0 in our favor, so be it." That revved the team up even further. When they were called out by Lee Jordan, again acting as announcer, Harry was like a bull out of a gate. He pulled a quick loop and landed in the center of the pitch. He was surprised to see Professor Snape refereeing the game. Not one to mince words, Snape was quick to release the bludgers and the snitch. Harry took a running start, leapt onto his broom and surged into the sky. Jordan's voice rang out, "And look at the Raven climb, ladies and gentlemen." For those unaware, Harry Potter rides one of the new firebolts. His own is serial number 7, the player number of the Seeker, and reportedly the best number magically. The broom is reported to reach speeds in excess of 150 miles per hour and the tightest turning circle of any broom on the market. Let's see what he makes of it today. Harry scanned the skies and kept a close watch on the goings-on below. Diggory was off a little ways doing the same. Dropping down closer to the play, Harry spotted the Hufflepuff chasers gain control of the quaffle and make a drive towards the Ravenclaw goals. Spoiling time, thought Harry. He put on a boost of acceleration to get above the tight formation of Hufflepuff chasers and dove straight down and through them before pulling a high G-force, swooping the broom around 180 degrees and driving straight back up through them. The Puff chasers were completely thrown off their game and Ravenclaw regained control of the red leather ball. From his drive back up, Harry kept the climb going before looping over to hang upside down and executing a half-barrel roll to regain his upright seat. He was instantly scanning the skies again. Diggory came over and said, "Be careful, Potter. You nearly de-seated one of my chasers." "I didn't connect with them, Mr. Diggory," retorted Harry, still scanning the skies. "I just frightened them enough to scatter their formation." As soon as he finished speaking, he put on his face an expression of surprise and glee to make it look like he'd spotted the snitch. Then he dove straight towards one of the tribunes behind Diggory. As he aimed to do, Diggory took off in hot pursuit. At the wall of the tribune, Harry executed a corkscrew turn that had him gripping the broom with everything he had before he was flying parallel to the wall. The tightness of the turn saw Diggory strike the wall firmly enough to nearly unseat himself as he fought to bring his own broom around. Harry suddenly jerked the handle to aim his broom for low in the middle of the pitch before coming up through the middle of the Hufflepuff formation again. Once more, he sent them scattering. The beaters tried to target him, but Harry simply outflew the bludgers. Sometimes he would fly slow enough to keep the iron balls following him until he'd accelerate at the last moment and fly back through the Hufflepuff chasers. This would cause the bludgers to attack the chasers as the closest players nearby. Reefing the broom around, he headed back for the side of the pitch before racing along its edge at goal height. Lining up on the Hufflepuff keeper, he forced the boy out of position just as Ravenclaw was lining up its shot from Changcho. But Harry wanted to see how fast the broom could go within the confines of the pitch, so he kept pouring the power on. After 2 quick circuits of the pitch, he aimed the broom straight for the sky and decelerated back down to a more manageable speed to search for the snitch. He had just started scanning the area again when a clear patch of sky moved over the pitch and allowed the sun to shine down. He instantly saw the gold glint down near the bottom of the Ravenclaw goals and had it in his hand less than a minute later, holding it aloft while he gently flew back to the center of the pitch and Professor Snape. In the end, the score was 90-20 for a stunning Ravenclaw victory. Harry was very happy when he flew up into the tribune where he knew his love would be sitting. He took her out of her seat and had her ride side-saddle in front of him as he had his arms past her to grip the broom and steer it. He flew slowly back to the castle and landed just short of the steps. He had once flown his broom during one of his solo flights directly back to the Ravenclaw Tower, where he left the window in his dorm slightly ajar. However, he found himself berated by a prefect who told him, in no uncertain terms, it was forbidden and that he could find himself in detention if he did it again. He didn't need to be told twice. After the game, they were in the home stretch for Christmas. A quick check of the calendar for most, though not Harry, and they could see that the express would leave on Sunday, the 19th December, with Christmas being the following Saturday. That meant 5 full days to shop for gifts. The 8 were excited to soon be heading home. What Harry thought very odd was that they had a visit to Hogsmeade scheduled the day before they left on the express. Passing strange. However, they weren't going to look a gift hippogriff in the mouth and decided to do some of their Christmas shopping there instead of in Diagon Alley. Maybe that's why we got the visit scheduled, Daphne, mused Harry. The townsfolk may have requested it for the opportunity to sell some items destined to become Christmas presents. Daphne shrugged and said, "It's possible." Accepting the opportunity, the original 7 went into Hogsmeade for the day. Harry and Daphne headed for Dervish and Banger's, first a shop that sold magical instruments and other items, before swinging by Zunco's joke shop. Harry made sure to give Gladrags a wide berth, but Daphne noticed and laughed. Another stop was at Honeyduke's sweet shop, where Harry bought bags for various friends. He'd already been told not to keep buying friends expensive gifts, and why, so was determined to limit his purchases. A 4th stop at Scrivenshafts for some expensive quills for Cygnus, Isabel and Sirius. Stopping for a moment, he thought of the perfect gift for Wendell and Monica, and bought him a magnificent quill set. Muggles might not use quills in practical terms, but they sure made an excellent display piece. He smiled and also picked up a couple of more practical sets of quills, ink and parchment for the Granger home. He thought that the Granger adults might like to learn how to use quill and parchment for when they had to write within or to the wizarding world. Fountain pen and paper immediately identified them as Muggles when they had to contact the wizarding world. Parchment and quill did not. He knew Hermione would be happy to teach them. He also noticed some example parchment with various headers similar to official Muggle business documents and formal letters. Approaching the older proprietor, he asked, "Mr. Scrivenshaft, sir?" "Yes, young man," the old man asked before taking a better look at Harry. "You're Harry Potter, aren't you?" "Yes, sir," said Harry. "I've noticed the parchment with the family and business letter headings. I've not seen this before in the magical world. Is it something new?" "It is, Mr. Potter," replied the old man happily. "I have a clerk who is Muggle-born. He showed me examples of what the Muggles do and suggested it might form a new line of products. I, for one, think it's a wonderful idea, sir." He ordered some parchment to be delivered to him by owl mail during the next couple of days, with the Potter crest as a header embossed on parchment. He also ordered some for Greengrass, Black and Dagworth Granger. He knew Wendell would take to it easily, but hoped Cygnus and Sirius could also see the benefit. He thought their 4 families could be trendsetters. He also asked for envelopes with his family crest embossed in the center of the flap. While he had the ring to press on the wax seal, having the crest embossed on the flap meant it would identify the sender was a member of the house, if not the head. When he explained what he wanted, the proprietor thought it was a wonderful idea and added it to his order with the promise he would organize it first thing on the Monday morning. Christmas was as wonderful as Harry had come to expect them to be in the Greengrass household. He was congratulated on his gifts as they represented something new, thoughtful, and properly valued. While Cygnus was at first unsure of the embossed letterheads, it was Wendell who convinced him of the value they represented. He was full of excitement in showing both Cygnus and Sirius the utility of letterheading and how it made their letters seem more official. Ducking back home to Dagworth Granger Manor, he brought forth examples of his own business letters and what he'd received from other businesses. He also showed both men how to use them for themselves. Isabel loved them. It meant she could also send out official invitations for functions and the like, and drastically cut down on her writing. Within a year, every important house was using them. Within 18 months, so was the Ministry and Wisingamot. Within the same 18 months, even Hogwarts was using them. The first letters sent using them were to the students for the 1995-96 year, and Mr. Scrivenshaft, who had magically patented the concept, was quickly becoming wealthy from the sheer amount of embossed parchment he was selling. Harry didn't mind, either. As a 10% stockholder, he was raking in the money too. Wendell and Monica also loved the display quill set of which Harry gifted them. He'd already spoken with Hermione about teaching them how to write with quill and ink on parchment. Monica thought it was quaint, but understood how it made her written correspondence to the magical world more acceptable. And Isabel also offered to teach how to write formal wizarding correspondence, as Monica, though a muggle, was seen as the acting dowager lady of the house. However, Monica also quickly learned that writing done with a fountain pen was indistinguishable from writing done with an expensive quill, and switched to that when she wasn't specifically practicing writing with a quill. Isabel later admitted to her she did the same, and that she knew other ladies of manners also adopted the fountain pen for the same purpose. Harry wasn't stupid. When he heard, he went out and bought expensive fountain pens for himself and his friends that most closely mimicked a quill. On returning to school, they began to use fountain pens whenever they were writing their assignments in private. What the professors didn't know wouldn't offend them, especially Professor Snape or Dumbledore. It also sped up the process of writing the assignments out quite significantly, giving them more free time to dedicate to other pursuits. Over at the construction site near Folkestone, Pettigrew made his move. Christmas Day was the one day of the year the construction sites on both sides were vacated. Only a pair of security guards manned the sites at each end to keep away sightseers who came too close. He headed in to the construction site at 1:00 a.m. when the last shift were pulled out and were away. In his animagus form, he scurried through the construction site and into the tunnel. He had to cross through 23.5 miles, then evacuate the construction site at the other end before he could consider the obstacle passed. As soon as he was far enough into the tunnel to be out of sight, he switched back to human form. Knowing he wasn't in the best of health, he kept his pace down to a brisk walk. It would not do to trip over a railway tie, sleeper or building debris and twist an ankle, or worse, break a leg. Steady but continuous forward movement would do it. He estimated that if he kept his pace to about 2.5 to 3 miles an hour, stopping for the occasional short rest, it would take him about 10 to 13 hours to reach the other end of the tunnel. Then he would rest and sleep and wait for dark again before he made his way through the French construction site, before the first shift after Christmas arrived just before midnight. His long experience walking from the northeast coast near Aberdeen to the southeast coast had taught him it was a pace he could manage, so long as he didn't continually have to dodge Auror search parties. "I'm coming, Master," he murmured, strengthening his resolve. As they had returned to London 5 days before Christmas, it also meant they'd be returning to Hogwarts earlier. So, on the 2nd January, the group were back on Platform 9 Hunters and boarding the express. Of course, most of the talking was about what people received for Christmas, or gave others. A few had news of short holidays celebrating Christmas abroad. But before long, they were back in the castle and returned to their studies the next day, the Monday. On Monday afternoon, they found Hagrid sobbing, leaving the castle. "Hagrid?" asked Hermione as the group hurried out of the castle after the groundskeeper. "What's wrong?" The big man spun about and saw Harry and the seven standing there, together, with dropping shoulders and tears in his eyes. He said, "They're going to kill Buckbeak." Harry didn't know who Buckbeak was, but it seemed Hermione and Neville did. "The Hippogriff?" asked Hermione. "Why?" "Because he hurt young Mr. Malfoy," sobbed Hagrid. "Professor Dumbledore. Queer man, he's trying to get him a reprieve. But it's the Ministry, you see. Lord Malfoy wants Buckbeak killed, and there's a hearing coming up." "When is this supposed to happen?" asked Daphne. "Not sure," replied Hagrid, blowing his nose and wiping his eyes with a small tablecloth. "Probably in a couple of weeks, paperwork and all." The group let him head on his way. "I hope he's all right by this afternoon," said a worried Neville. "We've got magical creatures then." Studies picked up pace. They were working hard, but they were all thankful they were still working ahead of the rest of their year mates. Effort was also made in helping Luna with drawing in magic for her own spell practicing. Thankfully, she was already a decent enough occlumens, but she wouldn't say why. All they knew was it was something to do with her father. They knew enough not to push, as they knew not to push Hermione and Neville about how they were maintaining their course load. Hermione's had eased, though, almost immediately after they had returned. Her parents and the Greengrasses convinced her to drop divination, which she reluctantly did. On the second Saturday after their return, Harry had his second game of Quidditch for the year. This time it was against Slytherin. He knew it was going to be a hard game, as he'd been told all the horror stories about how badly the Snakes cheated. Though he knew, experiencing it was an entirely different matter. The Snakes now knew Harry rode a firebolt and that Malfoy was no competition against him. As the game hinged on the performance of the Seeker, the team beaters Crabbe and Goyle, Malfoy's personal twin bookends, targeted him immediately, as did Flint and Malfoy. For most of the game, Harry spent dodging and weaving away from bludgers, beaters, bats, and sheer muscling from Flint. Malfoy held back and spent the time laughing at Harry until Flint yelled at him to find the snitch. Because the beaters were focusing on Harry with the bludgers and themselves, the Slytherin chasers were using their superior body mass to muscle Ravenclaw's chasers. However, with Harry effectively keeping the beaters out of the game by staying well away from the Ravenclaw chasers, the score was steadily rising for the Eagles. At two of the somewhat rare times the Slytherin chasers had control of the quaffle, Harry used them to separate himself of the Slytherin beaters by diving and climbing through their formations. It was similar to how basketballers position themselves to knock a player's tag off the person with the ball. He even managed to make Goyle crash into and injure in the process one of the Slytherin chasers. During the timeout due to injury, Martin instructed Harry to keep the beaters and Malfoy away from their chasers, and that it was about time he started using the higher speeds and maneuverability of the broom. So returning to the air, Harry used the broom to draw the beaters to him, and then accelerated away. He ducked, weaved, dove, and climbed. He caused both Crabbe and Goyle to bounce off the walls of the tribunes, and once even had them run into each other. Finally, he saw it. But Malfoy was closer and saw it at the same time. The race for the snitch was on, and Harry had both bludgers chasing after him. Luckily, the snitch zigged and Malfoy misjudged and zagged. By the time he was back on it, Harry was over the top of the blonde Ponce and pounced. Further luck was on Harry's side as Malfoy reached out and wrenched hard on one of Harry's foot pegs. They were both only a few feet off the ground when it happened. Unluckily for Harry, his arm was at full extension when Malfoy pulled his cheating stunt. Just as his fingers grasped the snitch firmly within his fist, he was sent flying across the ground without his broom. He hit the ground hard and was sent sliding and bouncing across the ground. He had just managed to come to a stop when he was, in turn, slammed into by Malfoy and both brooms. When Malfoy wrenched on Harry's footpeg, thereby unseating him, Harry's broom's automatic systems worked to bring the broom to a complete stop. It spun about due to the grasp on one footpeg and smashed across Malfoy's face, breaking the boy's nose and knocking teeth loose or breaking them off completely. In pain and while trying to stop, Malfoy lost his own grip on his broom and, tangled with both brooms, bounced once off the ground before smacking hard into Harry. Both boys woke later in the infirmary. Harry suffered the biggest injuries with 2 broken ribs, an arm broken in 2 places, a broken shoulder, and a concussion. But Malfoy actually came off worse with a broken nose, 3 broken teeth, a broken wrist and strained shoulder. The broken teeth required the remains to be removed and the teeth regrown. A painful process. When he woke up, Daphne, who'd been crying, spent 1 second yelling at him for not being careful enough, another crying because he was so injured, a third yelling at Malfoy for cheating, and a fourth wanting to hug him senseless without further damaging him. Harry didn't even have a chance to say a word back. He just made soothing sounds. However, he was soon rescued by Madame Pomfrey, who came along and shooed his upset betrothed out the doors. Harry was out of the infirmary the next morning, but Malfoy had another day under Madame Pomfrey's care and in pain for most of it. Harry felt the other boy deserved that and even more. What he had done could have killed him. It was also hours before he found out Ravenclaw had slaughtered the snakes and pretty much already secured the Quidditch Cup, and the season was officially only halfway through. Their only threat now was the Gryffindors, who they played on the 19th of March in 9 weeks. If they beat the Lions, Ravenclaw wins, and the final game of Gryffindor and Slytherin on the 16th of April will only be for second place. Once free of the infirmary before breakfast the next day, Harry joined the others at the Slytherin table. Without Malfoy there to spend most of the meal sneering at them and making snide comments, it was actually quite pleasant. And Crabbe and Goyle, while not the brightest candles in the chandelier, were actually pleasant to talk to away from Malfoy. Both boys were actually normally quite shy. "Can we spend today researching the law regarding magical creatures harming witches and wizards?" asked Hermione during the table chit-chat. Looking in surprise at the girl, Harry asked, "You want to try and save Buckbeak?" "Yes," she replied. "I don't think it's right for such a beautiful animal to be killed just because Malfoy was an idiot. You do realize that as an animal, magical or not, the hippogriff has no rights?" asked Daphne. "You're more than welcome to try, Hermione," said Harry, "but I'm sorry, the creature hurt a student. The fault lies entirely with Hagrid bringing a very dangerous animal to his first class, and third years, at that." "No, a hippogriff is something for 5th years and above, not 3rd years," said Harry. "I just hope Hagrid has learned a very valuable, though painful, lesson from this incident." "Well, I'm going to try," huffed Hermione. Harry nodded and said, "And I wish you luck. But Daphne and I have etiquette club this afternoon, and you know how important that is to the two of us." Hermione blushed and said, "Sorry, I forgot." 3 weeks later, Ravenclaw played Gryffindor in Quidditch. All through the 3 weeks in the lead-up to the game, Harry ensured Ginny had the nimbus for training. However, he could see the look she tried hard to disguise in her eyes that she did not fully believe he would loan her the broom for the game. On the morning of the game, he waited outside the portrait of the fat lady. As soon as he saw her step out, he was standing there smiling, with the nimbus in his hand. She looked back at him a little warily as he stepped forward and offered her the broom. He said, "A promise is a promise." When she accepted it with tears forming in her eyes, she said, "I know you're a man of honor, Harry, but I confess to doubting you would still loan me this wonderful broom when we played you." "Have more faith in me next time, all right," he said. She nodded as a single tear flowed down her cheek, until suddenly she threw herself at him, embracing him on a tight hug. Another grapple hug. "Thank you," she cried. "Earth, girl," he cried back. "Are you trying to bust me up so I can't play?" Releasing him and stepping back, she giggle-sniffled. "I think you'd still play, even with busted ribs." Giving a shrug, with a smile he replied, "Yeah, I probably would." That caused the small group of Griffs who were standing around to chuckle. The only one who wasn't was her slightly older brother, Ron, who just stood there glaring. With a jaunty wave, Harry walked off and said over his shoulder, "Even though I loaned you a broom, I'm still going to kick your butt on the pitch." "In your dreams, Potter," she called back. The game that afternoon was one for the legends of the school. It was also learned from Daphne, who had heard Malfoy talking about it with Flint in the Slytherin common room, that Malfoy, Flint, Crabbe and Goyle were planning on sabotaging Harry while he was flying during the game. With the help of the others, their plan was squashed within moments of the attempt. The 4 boys had all drawn their wands and were trying to cast light-free hexes and jinxes Harry's way. However, as soon as their wands came up, the others all disarmed them. In the game, everything started off fine. The twins even joshed good-naturedly with him, giving him fair warning they were going to be playing spoilers against him if they thought he got a whiff of the snitch. Harry was on the firebolt, which gave him far better handling and maneuverability, but Ginny was both smaller and lighter on the Nimbus 2000. They were even more closely matched than Harry dreamed, and Ginny knew how to defeat the advantages Harry had with a faster and more maneuverable broom from playing with her brothers on their better brooms in their backyard Quidditch pitch. The snitch must have also been kicked up a notch in its movements as it darted all over the pitch. Harry would get into a good position to grab it when it had changed direction. He'd make the turn, but Ginny would use him by ricocheting off him to make the turn herself, while also pushing Harry out of line. It also wasn't cheating either, as she was not intending to harm him and was focusing on the snitch. Then Harry would have to use the better qualities of his broom to get back in over the top of her and regain the better line. Neither could spare the time to watch the other players battle it out. If Harry had even taken the time to view the scoreboard, he might have even panicked. The Lions of Gryffindor, chasers and beaters, were all over the Eagles of Ravenclaw, and the Lions were streets ahead in points. However, after the longest game Harry had participated in since he'd started playing, he was eventually able to find a defense against Ginny using him like a pool table cushion and caught the snitch. Ravenclaw won 290 to 270. A victory, yes, but the cup was won based on the number of total points across all 4 games, a team secured, and Gryffindor was still in with a good chance. When it was finished, Wood was off to one side crying on Spinet's shoulder about how unfair the world was. Martin was dancing around in happiness one moment, then berating Harry for loaning Ginny his nimbus the next. Everyone else were heartily congratulating each other for a very well-fought match, and both seekers were commended for their flying. Lee Jordan had even coined a name for the ricochet maneuver Ginny seemed to have perfected. It became known as the Weasley Bounce. It seemed no one had ever used it before that anyone could recall, until the Firebolt brooms had not been so poorly matched. The cup would come down to the final game of the season. After all, the game in mid-March of Slytherin against Hufflepuff would not be a spoiler. However, if Gryffindor slaughtered Slytherin in April with enough points, they could win the cup, even though Ravenclaw won all 3 of their games. Harry's Firebolt had received some minor damage by Malfoy during the Ravenclaw against Slytherin game, and he desperately wanted to send it back to the factory to be properly repaired, with damaged twigs and ever so slightly bent foot pegs replaced. However, he'd made a promise to Ginny, so he'd hang on to it until after the Gryffindor-Slytherin game in mid-April. During the week, Neville and Hermione heard from Hagrid that Buckbeak's hearing was scheduled for the Friday. Dumbledore had already promised Hagrid he would be allowed to attend the hearing. Hermione was almost frantic in her search for any law or part of a law that would help to save Buckbeak from his fate. But she'd had no luck right up until the hearing. She had even approached Remus to seek help. But Harry's honorary uncle didn't have the heart to tell her there was no chance of saving the creature. It was finding Hagrid sobbing his heart out on the Saturday afternoon after they were returning from a Hogsmeade weekend that let them know of Buckbeak's decided fate. Weirdly, however, he wasn't to be executed until June. Even though sentence had been passed, Hermione was still trying to find a way to save the beast when they returned to their room in the come-and-go room. "Hermione," said Neville, "I'm sorry, but it's done. Even if you find something now, it will do no good. There are no appeals available in these kinds of cases." Hermione burst into tears. Susan and Hannah moved to comfort her. Harry mentally sighed and thought to himself, "I guess I'll just have to save the creature then." He and Neville looked at each other. Neville adopted a look of pleading, while Harry almost imperceptibly nodded once. Neville looked relieved and nodded back. The 8 soldiered on, with the teens all now focusing on their studies and training. They'd even reached the point where some, including Harry, were up to 3 target dummies. The dummies were now firing more and more powerful curses and charms as the teens dodged, danced, and shielded. Sometimes they'd have 4 target dummies with a wider area of battle, and 2 teens would be training simultaneously as a team. Harry was still a force to be reckoned with, and definitely not taken lightly. His speed was incredible, but Luna was developing a style all her own. While nowhere near as fast, she developed patterns and spell chains that were brilliant and sometimes awe-inspiring. She'd managed to chain a set of spells that included the Water Jet Charm, Freezing Charm, and Bludgeoning Hex. With a strong enough Freezing Charm, the damage from the follow-up Bludgeoner was dramatic. The parts of the target that were hit would shatter, while the target was often either unable to move quickly or frozen to the spot. Based on witnessing that, Harry dedicated quite a bit of time into developing his own custom set of spell chains, ones that would do damage to a single target or many. The secret, as Professor Flitwick told him, was to merge the last movement of the wand movement of a spell into the first of the next one. With his ability of perfect recall, Harry was almost instantly able to see all the curses and charms he'd already learned that had the same first wand movement as the last of the previous, or was in an easy position to lift into the next. One example was a slash wand movement that started high right and finished low left, which would then feed into the next spell, which started from the low left and ended back at the ready point at hip height on the right. Harry also noticed how he was often casting through his own shielding charm with a curse, yet the shielding charm in no way affected his curse. He took the matter to Professor Flitwick. "Ah," said the professor, "I was wondering when you'd noticed that. It means your spell casting is getting that quick that the two overlap." "Thank you. But why does it happen?" asked Harry. "It has to do with how the shielding charm is unidirectional," replied the professor. "It's designed to protect from an arc about 120 degrees wide, spread evenly from the central direction in which you cast. For anything else, the shield only diminishes the curse. However, if you cast both shield and curse, it isn't affected at all. That's because the magical signature of both match. You'll learn more about this effect and why it happens in arithmancy, after your Audiobook and if you undertake a mastery in charms. That is, of course, if you continue the subject into your newts." Harry frowned and thought for a bit. The little professor, knowing a Ravenclaw puzzling things out when he saw it, waited. Harry asked, "What happens when the shield and the curse are conjured by the same person but with different wands?" Surprised and not a little shocked at the question, the professor replied, "I do not know." He then thought a bit and said, "It actually creates an interesting situation. I've not heard of a wizard or witch who would set a shielding charm with one wand while casting, say, a bludgeoning curse with the other through the shield. There are laws in place that restrict a witch or wizard to only one wand. However, it does not mean that in a life-and-death battle one would not have two on their person, irrespective of what the law says." He thought a bit more and said, "Logic dictates that if the wands were identical, then there should not be much of a difficulty. However, if the wands differed quite a bit, then I have no idea what the effect would be." Harry stood thinking a bit more and mused. "It sounds like you're talking about resonance." "Pardon, Mr. Potter?" asked the professor. "Resonance, Professor," said Harry. "All energy, including light and sound, travel in waves. I'll get you a Muggle physics book that explains it in detail. But suffice it to say, it also makes sense to me that magical energy in the form of spells would do the same. Because the wand is a focusing tool for the casting of spells, it would have an impact on the frequency of the waves that form the magical energy of the spell. Using two quite different foci in two different wands must then affect the frequency of the cast. However, when cast through near-identical wands, and therefore near-identical foci, the frequency would also be near-identical. Resonance would be the point where the frequency is close enough for the energy wave for both the shield and the curse to be in synchronicity or phase, and would allow the curse to pass through the shield unimpeded. The professor looked back at Harry in stunned surprise bordering on shock. "Actually, Mr. Potter," said the professor, after a few moments, "while the terms you used are different to what is used in the magical world, that is almost exactly the answer for a master's level question in charms." Harry smiled back and said, "Then it appears, Professor, I'm on the right path. Now all I have to do is test my theory. And I'm afraid that's going to require a second wand that's as much in tune to your magic as your existing wand," said the professor. "And you're not allowed to own two wands under current wizarding law, Mr. Potter." Harry smirked back and said, "That's not actually true, Professor. The law states I'm not allowed to carry two wands. It says nothing about owning two. However, this school currently hosts two sets of identical twins, with one set being so in tune with each other they seem to be of one mind. I can always ask them to help. It would also not surprise me if the Weasley twins owned identical ones." Surprised yet again, the diminutive professor said with a little awe, "That is actually an incredible idea. I wonder just how close their wands actually do match." After he approached the seven and sought permission to do so, Harry approached the twins and took them aside for a private discussion. "Boys," said Harry, "what do you know of the come-and-go room?" The twins glanced confused at each other before one asked, "The what and what room?" Obviously nothing, said Harry with a smirk. I need your help with something, and I need to show the two of you a special room within the castle to get that help. What sort of special room? Harrykins? It would be best if I just showed you, he replied, before he started to walk away. Come with me, please. Harry led them up to the 7th floor corridor and gestured at the door. We don't remember there being a door here. Smirking, Harry led the twins inside to be met by the 7. A new couch also appeared around the table as the extra seating was needed. Both stood just inside the door, looking around in shock. Harry had to hustle them forward a little to close the door. What is this place? Asked one. The house elves call it the come-and-go room, replied Harry. It will configure itself to the wishes of whoever needs it. He walked towards the sitting-cum-studying area and gestured to the new couch. Come take a seat, boys. The twins, still looking around, came over and sat on the couch. Before they could formulate what they wanted to say or ask, Harry said, You're obviously full of questions. Ask away, and sat back. Over the course of over an hour, Harry and the 7 answered every question they could. Some, of course, they couldn't, as they didn't have the answers themselves. However, there were very few that fit in the last category, and no one was giving up Harry's secret of his eidetic memory. But that was unrelated to the room, so wasn't even asked. At the end of the question and answer session, one twin turned to the other and asked, Why did we never find this room, brother of mine? We never knew of its existence, is why, and yet we found all the tunnels. No, we found the map which showed the tunnels. Too true. Of course. Map? Asked Daphne. Ah, said one twin, the Marauders map. It's how we can find anyone. We're looking for within the castle, they said together. One of them drew the map from within his robes and laid it on the table before them all. The other then drew his wand and held the tip against the middle of the map and said, We solemnly swear we're up to no good. Lines began to trace across the page in all directions similar to the inheritance test ritual. When it was finished, one of the twins said, We humbly present the Marauders map, made by our heroes, the Marauders, Prongs, Padfoot, Moony and Wormtail. Sitting forward suddenly, Harry asked, Prongs, Padfoot, Moony and Wormtail. The same, the twins nodded and said together. Then it may interest you to know I'm the son of Prongs, said Harry. He then whipped out his wand and cast his Patronus. That's what he looked like, he said, gesturing at the form. The twins looked between Harry and his Patronus in shock. A quick glance at each other and they were both off the couch and kneeling on the floor. We're not worthy, they cried. Oh, do get up, said Hannah. The 2 boys rose and retook their seats. You would not happen to know who the others are, do you? Yes, said Harry. However, they clearly used their marauder names on the map for a reason. I will not break their trust to reveal them to you. Sorry. The 2 boys glanced at each other again before one said, Then for you sharing your knowledge of this room with us, because it's bloody brilliant for you to share it with us. And because this map is obviously a family heirloom, we solemnly return it to you. And both boys then slid the map in Harry's direction. With a quick demonstration of how the map worked, Harry could see just how useful a tool it actually was. And, by all means, you're welcome to come here and use the room, said Daphne. If there's no one here when you walk back and forth in the corridor outside, just think of this room and that you want to use the room Harry and his friends use. Then the door will appear for you to be able to enter. Just, please, keep it a secret. You have our word, Miss Greengrass, said one. The word of 2 of the new Marauders, said the other. Thank you to you both, said Harry. However, I've not just brought you up here to show you this marvelous room. I've also a favor to ask of you both. Oh? Pray tell. Harrykins. Firstly, Harry began, I know you are very near identical physically, intellectually, and emotionally, but do you know how close you are magically? Close enough that we have identical wands. And that almost answers my second question, said Harry before asked. Just how identical are your wands? Mr. Ollivander made them special for us, said one. When we tested out in his store, to both have the best results with the same wand, he then made us 2 new wands from the exact same block of wood and tail hair off the same unicorn. 11 inches long, made of elm with a unicorn hair core, they said together and whipped them out. Wow, that must have cost a bit of gold, said Susan. Nope, said one. Mr. Ollivander gave them to us for free, as long as we keep him informed of anything that seems funny happening to them. And it's perfect, exclaimed Harry, leaning forward. Now, I've got something I want you two to help me with, and I'm willing to pay you for it. The two boys glanced at each other and grinned before leaning forward. Here's what I'm looking to do, said Harry, as he began to explain why he specifically wanted them for his experiment on spell resonance.